All boys.
He pushed those buttons. He knows which ones to do. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's it.
Hey, you know what? One of these days he'll learn to use those powers for good. He does use it for good.
Draw the line.
All the time. Let me get some people to call. So.
All these little boys around me.
I told him next time all day with me.
Oh no, stop. A lot of cosmetic surgery.
So what yields are expanded?
They're way worse. Because not only they're low, they're full of toxins. Half the times it's what causes
How does small drought lead to bed conditions?
actually mold on the outside.
Yep.
Oh, so you get mold. They use that for a thing.
Huh?
The feed corn is money. I was in cornmeal and that kind of stuff.
It's not effective. If you put in the starches, it's not effective.
Quiet. Everyone looked at the clock. Everyone got really quiet, but everyone looked at the clock and went, wait a minute. Hey, Megan. Did you figure out the Lansing thing?
You mean, did I sign up?
Yeah. Did I do it and everything?
I just filled in my name and email.
Cool. And did you do the request?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Do that for the afternoon, for that meeting.
For the networking? Yeah.
Okay, no.
Yeah. It's easy.
For the form, like, you have to put in the information on the meeting, give it to her.
It should be in the leaving.
She's got no. His name is in absence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Just fill it out.
Of course, I get it. That's probably why it's not right.
I didn't see that last
I
thing.
thought about that today.
I did it on the email, I didn't.
Yeah.
The kids have a good driving record.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have it too. Yeah.
Oh, what are you gonna do?
Right.
Meeting will come to order at 7 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Hauk?
Here.
Mr. Mobley? Mrs. Nelson?
Here.
Mrs. O'Halloran?
Here.
Mr. Wrigley? Mrs. Tegmeyer?
Here.
Mrs. Sudlap?
Here. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mark, an introduction of new staff members this evening?
Yeah, we're very pleased to have our new staff members here this evening. Thank you for coming to this meeting. And we're going to have Matt and Meg introduce by name and position, and that's all. Okay, because we have quite a few of you. Okay. Who has to start?
I'll start. Be very proud to introduce 3 new staff members. So I have new 4th grade teacher Christina Forsley. Quinn, stand up, Christina. And, I have new speech and language therapist Colleen Slattery. And I have a new kindergarten instructional aide Elizabeth Cass. Those are my elementary folks.
Welcome.
Welcome. And I'm going to start with someone who's technically not new this school year, but was new at the end of last year and hasn't been introduced. Danielle Taliaferro teaches accelerated 6th grade language arts and 5th grade reading workshop. Her partner in 6th grade language arts is Natalie Castaneda. All right, on Level Language Arts. Thank you, Natalie. Next to them, we have Megan Leonard, our new social worker. Next to Megan, Stephen Johnson, our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade health teacher. Should get an award for hula hooping. In the front row, we have Simone Christ, 8th grade math. Next to her, 7th grade math, Becca Esposito. And last but certainly not least, Jill Baronio, who is 7th grade Spanish. Thank you all.
Welcome again. Thank you. And I hope your administrators told you that once you're introduced, you do not have to stay. So, should you wish to leave for the evening, it's certainly fine. Thank you so much for being here, though. Thank you. Yes. Okay, I'm going to declare the budget hearing open at 7:05 p.m. Catherine?
Okay, all right, welcome to a budget hearing. First of all, I'd just
Catherine,
like,
can you pause for 1 second? Erica, can you direct the camera?
We could, we were gonna leave it on just the group.
Is that how we're going to do it for this part?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
okay. All right, first of all, I'd just like to recap what I mentioned at the last month, tentative budget. For our last year's budget versus actual, our revenues did come in slightly under the budget by 3.1%. That was mainly due to a lot of, I'm seeing more residential refunds. And for expenditures wise, we were under the budget by 7.2%, and that was mainly due to no major expenditures being used up for O&M, basically, and also, it was also careful budget monitoring by all the administrators. So we did add $122,686 to fund balance. Between the tentative and the final budget for tonight, we made amendments to it, and for the revenue portion of it, we are decreasing it by $1,146. And in your board packet, in the budget packet, you would see that there were two main funds that were affected. The education fund was affected by $44,571. There was a decrease in that. And that was mainly due to receiving confirmation from our CPPRT amount for this year. There is a decrease of 15% from last year, so that comes up to about $60,000. However, it's offset by having more Title I money, about $13,700, and then getting the IDEA amount as well. So that came up to $44,571 of a decrease. And with the O&M, there's an increase of $43,425, and that was because we did receive and made sure that the school maintenance grant is safely in the bank, and so they added it in. Okay, with the expenditure side, you'll see that I've shaved off about $363,063. Majority of it, $315,300, was from the O&M. We have listened to the board members' concern about the O&M tentative budget, and so we've shaved off such that about $200,000 was shaved off from additional and replacement equipment. We have been lucky in prior years that we didn't have to use up a lot of money on that, so hopefully we'll be lucky this year. But if we do need to spend a huge amount, then we'll have to amend the budget. Okay. For the Ed Fund and the IMRF Fund, those were because of adjustments to salaries and benefits, since we have firmed up all the teachers and aides, and so that was an adjustment to it. So with revenues, comparing budget to budget, there's an 8.1% increase. And as I explained last month, we will be getting a 3% CPI. In addition to that, we also have about 13 million EAV in new EAV revenues. And then we also have a slight increase because of the $42,425 from the state. So if you're looking at this, the revenue by source and fund, and the distributions from local, state, and federal, there was a slight increase in state funding as well as a slight increase in the federal. Last year's local funding was 93.6%. The state was 5.4%, and federal was 1.0%. So there's a slight increase. Expenditure-wise, budget to budget, it's about a 4.5% increase. And I did put in your budget packet behind the expenditure tab an explanation of the increases in expenditures as compared to the actual expenditures. Looking at each fund as a percent of total expenditures, once again, our ed fund is the largest of all the funds, followed by our, that should be called debt service, so I'll make sure that I change that. Debt service is, bond is 11.33%, and then O&M 7.22%. Taking another, different look at it, looking through major objects, you'll see that salaries and benefits comprise more than half of the total expenditures. So our final budget for FY13 would be revenues of $13,469,274 for revenues. Expenditures wise is $14,452,819, leaving us with a slight increase, the difference of $16,455, bringing our projected fund balance, and this is unaudited numbers for our fund balances. Okay, our projected fund balance for FY13 would be $12,799,109, and that takes into account our balance transfer, the fund transfer of $750,000 from O&M to debt service. So, do I have any questions?
Anything from the board? At this time, is there anybody in the audience who wishes to ask any questions? It's one of the few times we actually ask for audience participation on a board meeting.
This is an open forum, though, right?
It's not open forum, it's strictly for the budget. If not, I am going to then declare the budget hearing closed at 7:12 p.m. May I have a motion, please?
I don't have it in front of me, but I'll make a motion to close the budget hearing.
No, we need to approve it.
Okay,
Yeah.
excuse me.
No, that's okay, take your time.
Okay.
Item D.
I make a motion that the Board of Education approves the amendments to the tentative 2012-2013 budget as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Board of Education approves the amendments to the tentative 2012-2013 budget as presented.
Mrs. Nelson,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Halloran,
Yes.
Mrs. Tegmeyer,
Yes.
Mrs. Sedlak,
Yes.
Mrs. Hope.
Yes.
Ayes have it, and the motion carries. May I have a motion, please? All we did was approve the amendments, we still need to adopt the budget.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2012-2013 school budget as presented.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Board of Education adopts the 2012-13 school district budget as presented. Roll call?
Mrs. O'Halloran,
Yes.
Mrs. Tegmeyer,
Yes.
Mrs. Hope,
Yes.
Mrs. Nelson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sedlak.
Yes, ayes have it, and the motion carries. We will have to take a slight pause. Do we have to sign now?
Yes, please.
Okay.
No, right
So
there.
if we could just give the board a few minutes to get the appropriate documents signed,
Right there.
and we will continue on.
Do we all sign this?
Erica?
Do I sign the certificate?
Yes, please.
one, right? If you could just pass that to Erica, then. Thank you very much. Additional items to be placed on the agenda. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add to tonight's agenda? Anyone? No? We'll move on to open forum.
I'm Michelle LeBeau, and I have a daughter that is part-time homeschooled. And some of you weren't sure how to vote a couple times because you didn't have enough information. So I wanted to just kind of give you some background on how this all came about. At one meeting, Leandra had said at her school that you had a student, I know she's totally homeschooled now, but that you had a student that would just miss classes and just make up the work. Grace went to regionals, and she was going to miss the second part of school, and she didn't want to miss the lectures. In a perfect world, this would have worked, and I understand that it didn't, but we found a science class in the morning, a social studies class, so hoping that maybe she could come in the morning and sit through the lectures. Because I find, and she does too, that the lectures and what the teachers have to say and to be there and hear what they're saying is extremely important. To miss that is missing part of your education. And so instead of just pulling her out all the time and missing classes, we took the route of part-time homeschooling her so she could be at the classes that she needs to be at 100% and get her homework done. There's other skaters that don't do their homework at all because they don't have time. So Grace gets her homework done. She participates 100% at the classes that she's at. She's at Pleasantdale for 6 periods out of the 9. I have her with a reading specialist. That's who tutors her. And Grace had an IEP previously. So the one-on-one attention that she's getting, I feel, helps her with her education also. She's very passionate about learning. She's very passionate about school. She's very passionate about skating. We went on vacation, and she found a rink that was in the area so she could skate every day. Sorry. I know that today you want to discuss graduation, and it's a rite of passage. And Grace has been with these kids since kindergarten. She's participated in the school. Sorry. And I would hope that you would let her participate in graduation. I understand, I'm not looking for her to get a diploma, certificate of participation, whatever. But just to be part of the ceremony. She has big, big dreams. Huge dreams. Like the song, Ethan sings it all the time. She's got great big dreams. So please don't punish her for that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Open forum?
I brought one. I knew I'd brought it. I didn't even write it down this time because I was like, oh, do you want one?
If we can go on to the consent agenda then this evening, consisting of approving the regular meeting minutes of August 15th, 2012, approving closed session minutes of August 15th, 2012, approving payment of August payroll, September warrants, approving personnel section 5, curriculum section 6, students section 7, and 2:220 board policies, and approving September 2012 personnel report. If I could defer first to the bill checker,
That would be me.
anything you'd like to bring to the board's attention?
Well, I mean, I got all my questions answered by Catherine, but if you would like, I can share with you guys what my questions were if you're interested.
Just maybe let us know what line
Okay,
items.
so line item number 12, I just was curious as to why we needed 3 databases when we only have 2 schools. And she said that it's one subscription but taken out of 3 different accounts. And so that's kind of how it was done. So that's why there's 3 of them, and one is like, looks like almost like a triple payment, but she explained it as how that went. The next one was number 17, which was a custom typing subscription, and that's software for grades 5 and 6. The next one was number 40. a property record report, and it was for an annual update to our fixed assets report. I guess they do this reevaluation, and it kind of affects our insurance rate in some way. So it's a good thing, I guess, that we do this. Number 47 was the monthly meeting dues, and I just was curious, is that every month? But Catherine assured me that it's not, it's an annual dues for the monthly meetings. So I guess maybe it should probably say annual dues instead of monthly dues, I don't know. Numbers 67 and 68, which were supplies, and I just said, you know, it always says supplies, and I never really know what supplies. So she kind of gave us me a list of like different supplies, and one was like a motor for the air conditioner, and one was shipping for the motor, and the other one was, I guess, refrigerant, because when you have an air conditioner, you need refrigerant. So that was what the supplies were. And then the last but not least was the, on the MasterCard, the iPads, we purchased 3 of them, and I said, why didn't we purchase them with the big bulk purchase, which was line item number 6, because it would have been cheaper to purchase them with the bulk and separately. And she explained that when you purchase in bulk, it has to be in packets of 10, and so Sam's was cheaper that way. Correct? Am I doing you fairly there? And then I just asked what the Amazon charge was for the teaching essentials, and she said it was for 40 books for the elementary school. And the last thing I asked for was the iTunes cards, and I said, was that apps for the iPads? And she said, yeah. So I figured it probably was, but I just was not sure. And that's it. Those were the only questions I had.
Does anyone else have anything on the bills? Or anything else on the consent agenda? May I have a motion then to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I move to present, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
May I have a second, please?
I will second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Board of Education approves the consent agenda as presented.
Mrs. Hauk,
Yes.
Mrs. Nelson,
No.
Mrs. O'Halloran,
No.
Mrs. Tegmeyer,
Yes.
Mrs. Sedlak.
Yes, ayes have it, and the motion carries. We, not right now, thank you for asking. If we could move on to reports and discussion items, please, superintendent's report.
Okay, first item is a special education status report. This is a more thorough report than I think we've ever done in the past in terms of special education. And we're doing this for a number of reasons. One, there have been, over the last year, questions in the bills about special education, and it was suggested out of the finance advisory team that we explain a little more about kind of the anticipated expenses and where they come from. Another issue with special education is that we have a very good story to tell, and there have been a lot of changes in that area in the last 3 years particularly, and it's just good for the board to be aware of all those. And then another good reason to be doing this now is it's likely that Hinsdale District 86 will be coming to the board sometime this year to request withdrawal from the LATSI co-op, and there might be some questions regarding that in general terms. I'm happy to address those questions because I chair the LATSI board, so I do know something about that. And Kelly, we're pleased you're here to present, and I have this request for the presentation. If you could let Kelly go through, I think she'll answer a lot of questions, but if you have a question, please write it down, because this presentation is not going to take 60 minutes.
No, gosh, I hope not.
But
It could have, anytime you talk about special education, right?
Yeah.
60 hours, but.
So if you'd be kind enough to do that way, if your questions do get answered through the presentation, it will save time at the end. So Kelly, take it away.
All right, great. Well, thanks for having me. Once in a while I get to come visit, and I appreciate coming in and talking with the board. So Mark asked me to talk a little bit about special education, and really it ties into so many things that we're doing in this district. It really ties into our early intervention programs, our preschool, programs, and it also ties in largely into our response to intervention programs. So really, we're targeting special education, but I'm going to talk about all of those different things encompassed in this report. So today, I hope to go through these 7 different areas in a very timely manner. We're going to talk a little bit about some demographic trends that we've seen in the district. We're going to look at our special education profile. We'll talk about our early intervention and response to intervention programs. We will discuss some of the instructional changes that have taken place in the last 3 years since I've been involved, things that I can report on. We'll talk about, again, visit some of our success stories of early intervention, and then talk a little bit about the future direction, which includes the role of LADSI. And I'm sure there'll be many questions about that, so we saved that for the last slide. Okay, so a little bit about our demographic trends. You can see this is information based on the Illinois School Report Card. And this, as you know, anyone that reviews the interactive report card knows that this is the latest and greatest data. It always comes out a year
Kelly, I'm gonna ask you
later.
to stop for just 1 second.
Yeah, I think, Erica, we wanna put the
We need to redirect the camera.
So,
Thank you very much. I apologize. Please continue.
So you'll see on the left, this I reported on percentage. So in 2007-8, you'll see our percent special ed was between 14 and 16%. And you will see over the last 4 years, we've had a pretty significant decrease in our percent special ed. You'll also note that our LEP, which is limited English proficient population, has had a dramatic increase. And you will also see that our low income population, which is also reported on the school report card, has had a dramatic increase as well. I think this is trends that, talking to my colleagues in other surrounding districts, that low income trend is definitely on the rise in the area. We know that's just the sign of the times. The limited English proficient, I will say, is kind of an anomaly of this district right now, the last couple years in particular. So just wanted to kind of point out those trends. This is taken off of a different source of data that's put out by the State Board of Education called the Illinois Special Education Profile. And this is a little bit more, it provides a little more recent data, but this shows our district special ed profile, again, based on percentage, in comparison to the LADSI cooperative area, which is comprised now of 13 elementary,
oh, I'm
13
sorry.
elementary districts, 3 high school districts. But we are just compared to elementary for this profile, and then also to the state average. So you'll see overall, this tells a really good story about our percent special education and the decrease we've seen over the last 3 years. This is another source of data that we have. Erica, when I came to Pleasantdale, it was really important for me to have a database of students and services and needs, and Erica revised something that she had in the past, so we keep very, very close record of the number of students that move in and out of special education throughout the school year. So that's where we were in 2009-10, and then you'll see in 11-12 where we're at. And this is based on numbers of students. And then these are what are called placement categories, and I just kind of made broad categories not to have identifying information for children. This compares us, again, from 2009 to last year, using the end of last year's numbers. You'll see in 2009, our speech and language category, we were at 60 students. We're now at half of that. Our resource students, we've also seen a significant decrease. Our early childhood, we've been kind of going up and down, which I would anticipate that would continue. And then our out-of-district placements, and those are students that are placed in specialized programs, and I will say these are the students that cost the most money to the district for sure, but these are students that have very unique needs that can't be addressed through the public school. That did go down a little bit last year. However, I will tell you that it is going to increase for this year because we have students that move in the district that have unique needs that we need to address. So that's nothing that we can prevent. It's just what we are obligated to provide services to all students.
So are these number of students on the side
This
or
is number
percentages?
of, number of students.
On this one too,
Mhm.
okay, thank you.
This is based off of the same data from this data. So what I did is I took this data and I broke it down into just broad placement categories. So again, you know, we'll ask, why has our special education number gone down? Particularly when our limited English proficient number has gone up and our low income number has gone up. The research will tell you, typically when that happens, you'll see your special ed numbers increase. I really feel it's been the hard work of this district and the teachers and the therapists that work in this district to focus on early intervention. I also believe that we have had a huge focus on shared ownership. By that meaning gen ed teachers, special ed teachers, reading specialists, whomever can provide services to students, provide services to students based on that child's need. We don't categorize kids in order to provide them services. It's not necessary to do that for a child that has a minor speech articulation need, for example. So we are truly trying to broaden who is available to help kids and reach as many kids as we can as early as we can. And because of that, I really feel that we've been able to target kids at a much younger age. I also feel that we had some kids that were not necessarily appropriately placed on IEPs at first, because in the past they needed to have that IEP in order to get those specialized services. There's other ways that we can provide those services to students without categorizing them as having a disability. So really what all of this is kind of a broad definition of what response to intervention is. It's about providing intervention early and often, analyzing your data, providing targeted intervention to students based on their needs, and analyzing that and going through that process over and over and over again. We are required by law to provide a response to intervention process prior to determining any type of special education eligibility, particularly in the area of specific learning disability. So you will see districts, and I've worked throughout the LADSI districts in the past, and I did specific coaching to help districts implement this model. And you will see districts that are implementing this model with integrity, their special ed numbers should drop. I can't promise you that ours are going to go any lower, because also part of that is that the students that are identified in special education are truly the students that need it. They really require that specialized instruction. And I can tell you, without giving, because this district's so small, I didn't want to put specific information up there about categories of disabilities, whether it's autism or cognitive impairment or emotional disability. But I will tell you that we have had a pretty dramatic increase in students with what we consider low incidence disabilities. So students with autism, students with cognitive impairments, students with unique like vision and hearing needs. We have an increase in students with developmental delays, which is a more global term, but they're for younger children. It's, again, not something unique to this district. It's a sign of the times. We have a lot of multiple births. We have a lot of children that are surviving horrific, entrances into this world that come with a lot of needs. So we are seeing that increase at the early childhood level. It is definitely not unique to Pleasantdale. It is. You can talk to anyone in any other district, they see the same thing. So why do we do what we do? I think there's been, I'm sure all of you have read, there's a body of research that's been out in the last 12 to 13 years, and it started with this National Reading Panel report. And this is just a grabbing statistic that 1 in 5 children have difficulty learning how to read, which is pretty significant. Where's my... Okay, so we know that reading problems get worse over time. This is just a graph that demonstrates what's considered that increasing of the gap. So the earlier we catch students, the more we intervene early, the less likely they are to have that gap. By the time they get to 3rd grade, 4th grade, it's much more difficult to close that gap. We're having to provide more intense services to students at those ages. Then they're missing parts of their core instruction. So we really, really want to focus on doing that as early as possible. So these are just some of the other problems that we all know lead to, that starts with kids that have academic and reading difficulties. And sometimes we know in the past kids are categorized as, oh, that difficult kid, that bad kid, they don't want to be in school, they don't like school, and really they're having academic difficulties. So the earlier we can target those academic difficulties, the less likely they are to develop some of these other behaviors that we may call them as they get into those upper grades. So this is what our RTI process looks like. Specifically, I just talked about the elementary school in this slide. We always start with looking at that assessment data, and what we use now, we use a combination of data. We used to use Dibbles. This year we switched to Ames Web because we added an early numeracy component so we could start looking at math. So we start with that student assessment data. We take that benchmark data along with our ITBS scores when we have those for the older students, along with our classroom assessments, and we meet in the next step in grade level teams, and we look at all of this data and we target those students that aren't meeting our grade level goals. And we're not just meeting, it's not just specialists meeting and myself, we're meeting with all of the grade level teachers. So that's different than what was done before. Before they were given the data, but there was not a lot of discussion, at least at the grade level, as to who was doing what we were targeting, what skill was being addressed. So we're doing that. Last year is the first year we did it with all of the grades. The year before we piloted it with just one grade. So we're doing what we call data reviews at least 3 times a year. And in between those periods, we have check-in meetings where I go and meet with the teachers in the morning, and we talk about those specific students that are getting supports or that are getting some targeted intervention. We monitor their progress throughout that time, and then we come back and hopefully discontinue the intervention if they don't need it anymore, which is the best case scenario, or we revise it, or we revise it by adding to it, taking away from it. I mean, our ultimate goal is not to provide any intervention. We want them in the classroom being successful with what we're doing in our core instruction. But this is the process that we use. Like I said, with all of our students at the elementary, all of the students are reviewed at least 3 times a year. So we feel like we're getting those kids as early and as quick as possible. These are just some of the interventions that we've looked at district-wide and adopted over the last 3 years. And without getting into specifics about these interventions, I will just tell you that first of all of these things target different areas of reading. So some of these are to address reading decoding. Some of them are to address comprehension. Some of them are to address fluency, for example. And then I did star the ones that are tech-based because I just want to thank the board for allowing us to have better access to technology. Because of that, we've really been able to use these things with more ease. Before we had some tech available, but it was really hard to get the students to a computer that had, read naturally on it. So now we have this, it's in the classroom, the kids don't have to move anywhere. It's not, creating the child to feel uncomfortable that they're having to get up and go somewhere. I'm happy Karen's here. She's definitely been our iPad expert. She has found amazing, amazing apps which have been fantastic for the younger kids because there's no startup time with that iPad, which is great. That's why I love it too. So I'm very excited about having more access to the technology, and I personally want to thank the board for allowing that to happen. We looked at this last spring when I was here, but I just want to point this out, and I'm happy Karen's here, and Connor too. This is an example of what happens when you do a few different things. This is our kindergarten data from last year. You will see that the 3 years prior, about 78% of the kids in the grade level were meeting the grade level targets on this one skill. Last year, we had our data meetings, we reviewed all of the assessments of all of the kids, we met on a regular basis, we set goals as a grade level as to what we were going to do instructionally. I know you remember that we had Jolene Lorimer from here. She did a lot of in-classroom coaching, which is huge, and we did very specific targeted intervention with students that needed it. And Karen was a huge part of this team and a huge reason why I think that number was so low, so I thank her. But this is phenomenal. So what that means is that last year 90% of our students met the target. What they tell you, what research says, is that about 85% of your students should be meeting your targets. if 85% aren't meeting your targets, then you really need to tackle what's going on in the classroom, that core instruction part, and look at what it is you're doing instructionally, because interventions are great, but first of all, they're only as great as the person delivering them. And the most important thing is that the kids have good, solid classroom instruction. Differentiation, active engagement, that's the most important thing we can do for our kids. So this tells me that not only was it going on in the classroom, but what we did with the kids outside of the classroom was working. And then this is just another area that we measured, demonstrating the same thing. So again, just to summarize, these are some of the instructional changes that I mentioned. I certainly don't want to read them to you, but I do think, again, it's an ongoing process. It's been a challenge to kind of merge services. You know, we were so used to working in silos, so the reading specialists worked with just the kids that were gen ed, that was just the Title I funds, and the resource teachers only worked with the students that had IEPs, and you know, we looked at that, and I came in and I said we could all be reaching so many more kids if we all just worked on this together and met the kids' needs wherever they needed what they needed. And I do think it's not easy. Scheduling is always a nightmare. I will say that, but the staff has been phenomenal. Matt has been phenomenal in allowing me the flexibility to use the staff in different ways at the elementary school. You know, it takes a lot of supervision as well to manage this kind of system. So I've been really happy with the changes that we've put in place, and the elementary teachers have been fantastic in accepting of some of these things that we've done differently. And then just in the future, what we're looking at is we're certainly going to continue to refine our data review process. We'll be looking at some guidelines for LD eligibility using the RTI model. We have some in place. I've certainly written them for other districts, and I also work at Butler School District, you're aware of that, and I certainly have them in place there. But I think just formalizing that for Pleasantdale School District and being able to communicate that with the staff is important to me. Looking at our professional development, again, I'll mention the best thing we can do is provide good instruction to our kids in our classrooms. So one thing that I know that we've looked at is the Regie Routman training materials that I know you've seen purchased by the district. And what that will help us do is further develop our balanced literacy model, which reaches into middle school, and that's really important. We've also, we're going to continue to implement what's called Fontes and Pinnell reading inventory. That's not an assessment, it's more of a diagnostic tool to help guide instruction for teachers and individualized reading instruction. We've used it for our special education students and our students receiving reading support for the past 2 years. All students at the elementary will be assessed using that to give their teachers a better idea of where their reading level's at, so they can take up those kids that really need to be taken up, and the kids that are a little bit lower can be reading at their instructional level as well. As I mentioned, we changed over to AimsWeb this year primarily because it offers us more variety of assessments to use, particularly in the area of math. So last week was our benchmarking week. It was the first time we did math with kindergarten and first grade, and it was great. And we used our technology for that as well. So we were able to assess the kids and get the data right in there using our iPads. So that was wonderful. And we're also going to continue to look at our small group instruction. I've been involved primarily with the younger grades, so I feel like that's definitely something that I need to make sure continues this year. And then looking at our technology and our interventions and kind of making sure we're using what we have and we're using it in the way it should be used. So that's kind of the end of my presentation on this area. And then I switch over to the role of LADSI. So would you like to ask questions about the first part before we talk about LADSI?
So why don't you
Finish?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're on a roll.
All right. I need some water.
You want a bottle?
Do you have a bottle of water?
Thank you, that'd be great. Okay. So a little bit about LADSI. Those of you know that in my previous life, well actually in my first life I was a teacher. Then I was at LADSI as a school psychologist and then as an administrator. And I was an administrator there for 5 years. So I feel like if you have questions about what LADSI does, I truly can answer your questions about that. The purpose of a co-op, we know, is for districts in an area to come together and join forces to share services, to reduce the cost of services. It really is supposed to be in place as a benefit to particularly smaller districts. Some of what they do is they manage the IDEA funding, the IDEA dollars. Those are the federal flow-through dollars. What little there are, they manage that grant. And every district brings in X amount of federal IDEA dollars. I believe last year our district brought in $187,000 worth of IDEA funds generated through just our child count of students that we know have special education needs. So that money is then goes through LADSI and is used to provide those services that are listed up there to us. So we have a speech therapist in the district that is completely a LADSI employee. Actually, we have one in 1.3 because we have someone in our specialized early childhood program. We have occupational therapy services that are hired and provided through LADSI, physical therapy, and school psychology services. There's many others, but those are the bulk of what we use. And even if LADSI didn't exist, we would still have to have those services and pay for them elsewhere. So that money is first used to offset those costs, and then that money is also used to provide us what I consider specialized services. So vision and hearing services. They work with another cooperative called CASE, which is an even more specialized cooperative. It gets very convoluted the more specialized you get, but so they provide us access through CASE. They have assistive technology, which is a fantastic team that we have access to on a regular basis, and they are experts in allowing us to have students access technology to read, write, in some cases talk. So they have specialists on staff that work with us on a regular basis. They have autism consultants that we've used, they have behavioral consultants that we've used, and then they also have early childhood evaluation services that we use. The other role of LADSI is to provide what I consider specialized classrooms. They are classrooms for kids, again, with low incidence disabilities. So they have a classroom that's a multi-needs program that's for kids that are very medically fragile, for lack of better terms, or kids that have very significant cognitive impairments. Their communication development program is for students with autism. And then they have a phonological program. They also have an ED program, which I did not put up here because we currently don't have any students attending that program, but that is for kids that have significant emotional needs. And then we also have a phonological program, and that's a really great program. That's just access. It's just for preschoolers and kindergarten age students, and it's a very intense speech program that works with kids with a very specific type of speech articulation disorder. Most kids come out of that program needing no services at all. It's a highly effective program. And then the other thing I will say in the last year, I mean, even since when I was there, they had a huge push for increasing our professional development that was offered to the districts. And honestly, every year it gets better. Every year it gets better, and it's free to our district. It's not just special education, areas. It's gen ed, professional development. It's administrative areas. They have a huge offering of PD activities. So that's another piece that we use LADSI for. So that's my LADSI slide. So now I really am. This is my question slide. So now it's time for you to get the list of questions out.
One question that I had is you were going through the slides, and you were on the one where you talked about reading problems getting worse over time, and showing how that gap continues to widen. Are we at a point where we have enough resources, I would ask, at middle school? We hear so much about what we're doing at the elementary school in terms of reading. I'm questioning, especially since you say further we go on, the harder it is. We have sufficient resources at middle school.
I think, the students at the middle school that I'm involved with are, specifically the students that have special education plans. And I know we've put a lot of time and effort into providing better professional development to our resource teachers over the past 3 to 4 years. And really, I'm going to kind of defer to Meg on that too.
Are you talking about the IEP students
Well,
specifically?
not necessarily, I mean, it could be, because, you know, what I'm hearing is that, you know, we have implemented a lot at the elementary school, because early intervention, but not everything is gonna work, or some students are going to be moving into our district later, where they haven't had the benefit of those early intervention. So since I'm hearing so much about reading, it made me question, do we have, you know, comparable resources either that we can provide or that are available through LADSI to ensure that the type of programs that we feel we are offering as early intervention services at the elementary school level for those students who either still need them at the middle or who are moving in and never had that benefit, can we still accommodate them? So
I would
it's
say
kind of where I'm
yes.
coming from.
Do you want me to talk?
Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead, Meg, please.
I would say yes. We have levels of intervention. We don't necessarily speak in terms of RTI, but for example, I introduced some teachers as reading workshop teachers. Those exist at every grade level specific to that grade level. Classes are very, very small, and they're targeted at our, shall we say, less successful readers. Not necessarily kids who would qualify for an IEP, but who need extra time and attention to their reading. So that's what reading workshop is. Now, we do also have what we call resource reading classes for the various grade levels. It's a very small population. Those are kids with IEPs, and those are kids whose reading levels really don't allow them to stay in the regular curriculum. They need their own curriculum. So I would say that we do have the, you know what I mean, levels of support at the middle school. It isn't quite as, how shall I put this? I don't know, I think the slide would be it's big, but arguably, if we're doing a good job as a district, K-4, we shouldn't have the number and levels of needs at middle school that we do at the elementary.
And kind of the question about whether you have adequate resources is always beauty's in the eye of the beholder in terms of whether there's enough resources, and for some people there's never enough resources. But what we really need to look at for that question are what the numbers look like. And so the board has seen those numbers, but you see so many numbers you probably don't recall, you know, over time. But for the last, there've been a lot of changes at the middle school too, in terms of reading, but the numbers have been very good. By the time the kids are in 8th grade, we have them all reading at grade level with maybe 1 or 2 kids that have an exception to that, and the board has seen that every year. So by 8th grade, and I'm very proud of this, and Meg and the middle school folks should be as well, you know, it's not that we just have them meeting targets, we have them at grade level. So that's critical. And you know, the track record in terms of what the numbers look like have been very good. And I think I attribute a lot of that to first the support of the board to provide reading support in lieu of Spanish, which was a change that we instituted. So these kids, you have to remember that these kids would get an extra period of, you know, whatever they need every single day. And then plus all the other supports we put in place really seem to have been working. So in terms of, you know, what would you base, are the resources sufficient? The numbers indicate that, yes, we're going in the right direction, and it's gotten better every year.
So if we have a student who has an IEP and it is determined that there is some type of additional resource that needs to be had, whether that is an assistive device, whether that is a piece of software, what have you, what role does LADSI play in that then?
Sure.
If it doesn't exist, if LADSI doesn't have it and District 107 doesn't have it, what then?
Well, if it was a student that we were looking at any type of assistive device, that's when we bring in the assistive tech team. So they would come in and they would complete a series of observations, evaluations. They never, the nice thing about the LADSI assistive tech team, I've also worked with private assistive tech teams from places like Easter Seals. The private places tend to say, oh, this is, you know, they'll pick the device of the month. and this is a great device, try this device, or take this program, try this program, and then you're tied into purchasing this, you know, program that's thousands of dollars, and they realize that the student, it's not even something that works with the child, or the child doesn't like it. So what LADSI does, which I like, is over a series of time, they will trial certain things with the student to see, is this the software that best meets their needs? Is this the device that best meets their needs? So when we are making a decision about what a child needs, I feel like, first of all, it's a team decision. I'm highly involved in the decision, the parent's highly involved in the decision, and the entire team, including the gen ed teacher, is involved in that decision. It's not just one person coming in and making a recommendation. It's a team approach versus like a specialist approach. So if LADSI doesn't exist, and we have students that need that, we have to defer to that specialized approach, and I will have to go out and contact Easter Seals to come in and do a one-time evaluation for assistive technology, and I'm basically subject to whatever they recommend. So that's what happens when you don't have a cooperative that understands how the public schools work. And really, truly, their mission is tied to individual student needs. I mean, they are really trying to do what's best for kids in an inclusive environment, in the least restrictive environment possible. You don't always get that when you look at specialized evaluations from outside people. Did that answer your question? A little bit?
I think so, in terms of, you know, the tangible, more physical software though. What then?
Meaning, what else does LADSI provide to that student?
Or, you know, again, if you think that there's another program or what have you that would benefit that child, right?
Like a instructional program, you
Could
mean?
be. Mhm.
Okay. Well, if it was a low incidence student, all of their programs, whether it's the multi-needs program or CD program, they all have coordinators that work for that coordinate their programs. So those coordinators also serve as consultants. So they come out and they would, again, do multiple observations, work with the team. They are not trying to find kids, because believe me, the kids find them. They truly want kids in there only when the school district, you know, cannot program for them. They're not trying to hunt down classmates. So I do feel like them coming in, and I've had them in, and they've consulted with students in our district. And they were students that, you know, the team wasn't quite sure they could work with this child anymore, if they could do much more in the public school setting, in our classrooms, and they have helped us work through some of the educational issues that we were having with these students. So we use them for that. That's another way that we use LADSI for our students. The school psychologist is a key member of our staff, and that's a LADSI person as well. And not only does LADSI have the occupational therapist and the physical therapist and the school psychologist, the actual people, but they have supervisors of these people that are also highly specialized. So if you don't have that anymore, then it's someone like Matt or me or Meg supervising these people. You know, I don't have the technical expertise to help an occupational therapist much, or a physical therapist much. So it's nice that LADSI has these specialized coordinators that truly provide awesome supervision to their related service staff. The other thing that is nice cost-wise is that if you have to go, if LADSI doesn't exist and we're a small district, for us to go out and find our own occupational therapist would be very difficult, given our salary schedule versus what they can make in a hospital or at an agency. So then again, you're subject to paying an agency fee, which is extremely high for related service people, OT, PT, speech, very, very high. Much higher than what we pay to LADSI. Did I answer your question more?
Let me try one more time.
Okay.
But I think we're getting close.
Okay. Because I guess I'm not understanding the exact
let's
question.
go back to what you were talking about
Okay.
in terms of the dollars for right now. So, you know, we know that the money is used to staff LADSI. You know, pays for salaries, benefits, and
Right.
what have you goes with there. Again, student is identified as needing X, whether X is a piece of software, a piece of equipment, what have you. LADSI doesn't have it we don't have it. You determine that they need it. Let me ask this, who pays for it?
We do.
Thank you.
We do
Okay.
meaning Pleasantdale or?
Yes,
yeah.
Pleasantdale. Regardless of where the child's at, if they're placed at Helping Hand, if our child needs a piece of equipment, we have to purchase it. Doesn't matter. So.
That was a much easier question.
That was
I just tried to go about it and maybe
I gave
not
you the
a
really
more
long
subtle
answer.
way. But that's kind of what I was getting
Okay,
at.
yes,
is-
yes, we're
is
responsible
if
for
you
it.
have, yeah, if you have an identified need and Lansing doesn't have it, we don't have it, you know, kind of what happens then.
Yeah.
So that is all the questions
We
that
still
I
have to
had.
pay for it.
Somebody does.
Someone does,
Right,
yes.
right, right. Well, when you know you have those federal dollars that are going through LADSI, I think
Mhm.
there's sometimes is a question that when the district does have to wind up paying over and above,
Mhm.
why are we paying over and above when we're already paying for LADSI?
Right.
So I do think that there is times that there is a misunderstanding
Sure.
of the purpose of how those dollars are utilized
Right.
at LADSI and when there are costs that go over and above that the district still is required to pay. Those are all my questions.
Okay.
For anyone else on the board?
Well, thank you for doing this. I was part of the finance committee that said, the impetus was that I noticed that our expenses were going up, and they've gone up drastically, and Mark said it was due to our special ed. So I guess with that, I'm a little confused because I know our dollars are going up, but the numbers look great and they're going down, the numbers
Right.
of students.
Right.
And even the severity, because you said the ones that are out of district, that has gone down and that they cost the most. So I guess I don't understand why our costs keep going up.
Well, there's a couple of
Dropped
reasons.
40 kids over the last 2 years out of the
Right,
program.
right. The students that we provide services to in our district, those are not the students that are costing us the most dollars. It's the students in those out-of-district placements. Last year it did go down, but at the end of the year, we had a couple move-ins, and then over the summer, we had a couple more move-ins. So those are gonna go up again. When we have a student move in that has severe medical needs that requires, nursing 100% of their time, we can't say, no, we're not providing that. We have to provide that. So, in a district this size, you get 1 or 2 students in that have that level of need, and that really can increase your costs.
So even though we've decreased probably about 40 students over the last 2 years, our costs have continued to
Yes,
escalate.
because-
to that.
Well, the cost for that
To the
category is
severity.
student.
Right, well, because remember what I said, the students that remain in special education, and so I said I can't promise you it's gonna get any lower, because what happens when you do a better there's always gonna be students with disabilities, that's why we have federal legislation. The kids that are there are pretty significant, and the kids that I'm seeing come into the district with disabilities are pretty significant. And these are not things that are gonna go away through intervention. These are disabling conditions like autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome. Those are disability areas that
So
are gonna go up.
So the severity has gone up.
Yes, the
numbers have
severity has gone
decreased,
up.
But the severity
Yes,
has gone up. Okay.
absolutely.
Great. I mean, it's not great. Thank you.
Other questions? I had a few, I was kind of like, nice report, but I was kind of hoping for more of like the numbers and statistics, like how much do we spend at Lansing? How much do we spend in-house, how much do we spend sending children out of the district? So I guess I was kind of looking for more of numbers, like, because, in order to be fiscally responsible, I think most taxpayers aren't really concerned about struggling readers. They want to know how much are we spending or where is our money going more, so to speak. So I was kind of hoping to see more of that, and maybe we can get that from
I'm
Mark.
kind of curious, is that something you guys talked about in the finance?
Absolutely, that's
that
exactly
what
what I
you-
was looking for. And then with the dollars, the incoming dollars.
Like, I don't know how
to
much we get.
to get a percentage of how much is offset. How much are we really?
How much is that what you mean, how much IDEA
Well,
funds?
I know, I get information about IDEA from LADSI, and I know exactly how much IDEA dollars we have coming in, and, I pulled the sheet that I have, and, last year we had 183,000, for this fiscal year, allocated, we have $183,912.
$183,900.
That's it.
But
total?
see, we
So
spend
that's
a lot more than that, so.
Oh, we
Right.
I mean,
We spend a lot more than that.
So what I'm saying is, do we get it from anyone else? Or is it just our tax base?
Local.
Just local. Oh, and that's what I was curious on. So like maybe if we could have like a chart of that, that would be great. I know Mark, the
Could you be
most
more specific?
I think I understand. You want to see where,
in and out, you know, that sort of thing. Like this comes from Lansing, this comes from local base, this goes out, you know what I mean? Just sort of something, I mean, maybe it's in here, I just can't find it. Do you know what page it would be on?
Well, you have your special ed line accounts and everything that we
Yeah.
spend
I
is
know, but
listed
they're in
there.
so many different areas.
That's why I was asking if you could be more specific in terms of
Okay,
what your question
so maybe
is.
a chart would be good. But my other thing is you gave us a list recently of the special ed kids, and it looked like it had gone down, the ones that we service out of the district. But now you're mentioning we have a lot more new ones, so maybe we could get a new list of that as well.
right, it's just hard because this district's so small and in an open forum, I am not comfortable.
No, I know you can't-
like, just providing, because we all know, I mean, we all know who the new kids are sometimes, and we all know, so I would be happy to summarize the cost of those programs and the numbers, but, I just didn't feel comfortable
Yeah,
in
I mean,
an
I
open
just
board
wanna
meeting
know,
doing
like,
that.
you know, we have, you know, X amount of children that are serviced, you know, based on their need.
Right.
I don't know, just, I know that other school districts, I've contacted them about like how they do their special ed report, and I've seen some, so that's why I was kinda curious as to that. Let's see. Like, another thing is we spend some money on busing them, so that would kinda be like in that chart I'm thinking of, that I'm visualizing.
Sure, like
Okay.
our transportation costs versus our, what we get back from the
Yes,
state.
that sort of thing, like, I mean,
Yeah, we
obviously-
did provide that in a weekly update a few weeks ago. Regular
I
ed
know,
and
but
special
Mark,
ed.
I need it all pulled together, like if I could just see it on that's what I'm kinda hoping for. To see it all in
That's why I'm
one
trying
place.
to have you be more specific, because you're asking for a chart. So
You want me to
what on the
kinda-
chart would you?
I'll kind of come up with something maybe and send it to you or something.
Sure, and you know what, I
No, you
can
can send it to
certainly,
me, Gina.
yeah, I can certainly talk to colleagues that have provided.
Done that type of report, so something that lists
Sure.
the total income, or.
Catherine can give me the
income,
numbers, and I'll
Expenses,
come up with
and how
the,
it's being
the
disseminated.
format.
Right. And then like on your chart here, you have the numbers from 2010-11. When do the newest figures come out?
Is that the school report card one?
Yeah, I think that was the one you just had on here, 2010, 2011 for the most part. Here, some are 2011, 12. But like, do the newest figures come out like, the very first slide, I think it was.
I don't know when the school report card data comes out.
Okay, so we won't have that just yet.
This is the latest and greatest. I don't know if anyone else knows when it comes out.
Usually later fall.
Okay,
Yeah.
hang on, let me flip through, and I know I wrote questions on different slides as you were talking. I was concerned, I know Leander had kind of addressed it about the middle school. I know you talked about the process at the elementary school, and I'm just concerned that, you know, like, that we have a process and we have a plan at the middle school as well. Because you mostly focus on the elementary.
Right, and I think, you know, given my time in the district, I've certainly, because of my background and expertise, have spent more time with the elementary teachers, even supervising, you know, some of the preschool, kindergarten areas. But at the middle school, they have regular grade level meetings, and they're always looking at data. I am not involved in those grade level meetings. I'm certainly involved with the special education students. So given my time, yes, I have definitely spent more time at the elementary in this
Okay.
area because our focus has been on early intervention and kind of revamping that preschool, kindergarten area.
Okay, and I know you spent a lot of time talking about reading, and I'm sure that there's just as much data on math, or should we?
Well, we just started collecting the math data this past week, just using Ames, so we certainly have ITBS math data.
How soon will that Ames Web be available then?
The benchmarking data?
Yeah, like, you know what I mean, obviously you took the first one, and you
Sure,
took eight.
sure.
So,
We're
like
gonna be
May?
reviewing it like in 2 weeks, we'll have it.
Oh,
I
so-
mean, we already have the data, but we're gonna be discussing it as teams, not next week, but the following.
So maybe we'll get like another report from you, obviously, in the spring,
Sure,
based on that, okay.
sure.
Let me
well,
just,
but-
you know,
Okay, I'm
hang on
sorry.
a second here.
What-
I'm just, you know, let me remind you that as part of the fall report for the last
Oh, that's right, you do.
10 years includes information on, well, Dibble's
Benchmarking.
previously, but also the Ames Web, and that'll also be
It'll be in the fall report.
the fall report, and then also we give another report in June,
Right.
I forgot about that, yes.
Okay,
So it'll be incorporated as part of that.
as it always has been.
okay, hang on. Okay, so you talked about like the role of LADSI, I'm flipping to that page.
Sure.
You had said like that the speech teacher, the occupational teacher, the physical therapy, they all come from LADSI?
Not all of our speech
Oh,
therapists.
so not all of them?
No.
Okay, because
no.
I know we just introduced one tonight. I was
Sure.
wondering, is that LADSI or that's our
No,
employee?
she's our employee.
Okay.
We employ 2 of our speech therapists full-time, and we have 1.3 FTE that are LADSI speech therapists.
So Pleasantdale employs 2
Mm-hmm.
and 1.3, you said?
Correct. And those speech therapists also, it's not just services for K through 8 students, it's our large percent for preschool.
Okay, I understand. All right.
Well, she's looking
I
at
think
one
that
and a
was
half
pretty much
FTE
it.
that we just approved today for aides at the middle school. Those were new students or those students that?
Some students moving up from 4th grade and some new students as well.
So how many children do you think we have in special ed in our district altogether? And one more
Was it like
question.
105?
Was it?
No,
I
I
didn't
don't
see it
remember what
on
my
the
last
slide.
figure was. I can't tell you that at the beginning of the year, I've gone through and put a number on them right now. But as of last year, at the end of the year, we had a little bit of, I would say about 105. Yes.
105
That was
students?
last year.
That was
year.
the end of last year.
Which includes all categories, speech included. and
Everything,
support.
yes. All the out-of-district students are included in that.
Right. Includes also. And my last question, I think, is when you talk about special ed and IP, that encompasses 504s or no?
No, 504 is completely separate.
Completely separate, so that's, okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't
that's-
sure if that fell under the same umbrella or not.
No, that's a totally different area of the law.
That's what, I mean, I'm familiar with it, but I was just like, I didn't know if
Right.
that was part
Yes.
of the thing, I never heard it mentioned.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You know, quick question, the LASI program that we have here at our school.
The early childhood program. Mm-hmm.
How many are internal and how many are we bringing in? I think last I saw that
Sure.
2 had
We,
signed.
we currently have 6 students, 4 of them are ours,
That's okay.
2 of them are not ours, and I anticipate 3 more coming into the classroom within the next 2 months, and all of them will be 107 students.
How many, 3 more?
So
And
that's
is
just,
that maximum capacity?
10 is the maximum, so we'll have 1 spot left. So that just tells you, again, the severity of student that we're seeing come into the district.
Mid-year or after the beginning of the year?
Right, well, because at 3, they turn 3, then we have to provide them services.
Oh, it just depends on
Mhm. Sometimes on when their birthday falls.
So they can come at any time. because
Yes, they
they're
come
in the
April
area.
15th and we have to
Gotcha.
take them in right then.
Right,
Okay.
I understand.
We'll let them graduate with the preschool class.
Kelly, I just have a question regarding your RTI process.
Sure.
When you say you do this 3 times a year and then 5 times per year for special education, for students with special education services, what is the communication or the collaboration with parents and home on that? I mean,
Sure.
how is it recorded? How is it provided to them?
Good question.
Just kind of curious.
And I'm gonna kind of defer to Matt too on this, because I know that the students that have special education plans, those parents certainly get regular updates as to how their students are doing. We've also started to include something called an instructional planning form. So it really targets what areas they're getting instruction towards and what we're doing with them. As far as the general education students that receive reading support, I'm only speaking of reading support at this point, those parents are informed through the reading specialists and or the classroom teachers that they're getting services, so the parents are definitely involved in knowing who's seeing them, when they're seeing them, what it is they're doing. And if at any point we get to the point that we feel that we are looking at a special education plan or what we're doing isn't working, we have the parent come in for a meeting and we discuss things with the parent in person. So Matt, was there anything else?
I don't
Has
know
that
what else I
covered
could
it?
add to that.
Okay.
Anything else? Kelly, thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
your thorough presentation. And although the board might still have some questions and really trying to better understand the financial side of things, I think we've all been enlightened in terms of the process
enrolled.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, next item. Board policies, these, there are 4 policies up for discussion this evening. These are all policies that have been discussed by the board in the last 3 to 4 months, I believe. We'll take them just one at a time, as we typically do. First one, 740. The board has 2 versions of this. The first one being our current policy, and this refers to non-public school students, including parochial and homeschool students. And I believe it was Karen that is advancing consideration of a change in this policy. Is that correct, Karen?
And as it turned out though, Mark, when we looked at model policy, this is actually what was in press release. So, I mean, this was model policy as well.
So I would open it up for discussion.
I'm gonna go ahead and throw my 2 cents in right away, from the beginning. I know what was concerning me most about, well, there was a couple things about the way that this was written. But more so, it was allowing a student who is in attendance half the amount of time and then going to the academic eligibility rules. That was where I had my greatest concern, is that I felt that if we had students who were in attendance less than a regular student, and I didn't feel that we were holding them to a comparable level of academic, to be accountable academically and still be allowed to participate athletically. That's what was bothering me about this. So I did ask Mark, and thank you very much for including that 1 page from the handbook that says that a student with 3 Ds and any F is ineligible to participate. And I looked at it as, you know, hypothetically, you know, if a student was here 50% of the time, and I would ask, actual classes, and I'm going to go to the middle school, actual classes, so not lunch, so not periods of the day, actual classes, how many do they take in a day?
8, including exploratories.
Okay, so 8. So if a student was here 50% of the time, that would mean 4 classes. A student who has 2 Ds can still participate. So if you only take 4 classes, to me that says you only have 50% of your classes at a C or better and you're eligible to participate. But a student who has 8 classes and earns 2 Ds is at a higher percentage of Cs or better. That was the part that was bothering me the most. So, you know, I tried looking at both of these and asking myself, is there a way that we could either modify the academic eligibility rules so that it's more of a tit for tat, where it's prorated, where it's comparable, or should we look to possibly increase that 1/2 to a higher number? That was the dilemma I was finding myself in with these 2 policies, or with this policy and then the academic eligibility.
I'm missing something here, because it says on the student handbook, page 7, it
Mhm.
says of 3D class averages or any F class. It doesn't say 50%. So, I mean, if we just follow this policy, if they had 3 Ds or any F, right,
Right.
out of 4 classes,
But what concerns me is not that part, it's the opposite. If they're only taking 4 classes, and I'm looking at it as what do they need to participate? If they have 2 Ds, they could still participate.
And they're only taking 4 classes.
4
but
classes,
not according to this, if they have 3D class averages,
then they're ineligible.
correct.
So if they have 2 Ds, they're still eligible.
Oh,
Am I reading that correctly? Yes, if they have 3 Ds, they can't participate. But if they have less than that, they can still participate. So I'm looking at it as a student who's here half-time who's taking 4 classes. If they earn 2 Ds, they are still eligible to participate. And I'm looking at that as they are passing 50% of their classes here at Pleasantdale. But a student who is taking all their classes here, all 8, who has 2 Ds is passing 6 out of 8. So they are passing more of their classes. both students are eligible to participate. And to me, that just seemed to be disproportionate. That's all I'm saying.
Seemed very.
Well, I think you have a related issue here as well. Part-time student taking PE, art, maybe some of the non-core classes, not to diminish the importance of those, but you know, that's really a different standard so when you're looking at that. And you know, there's just no way you're going to make a policy that can look at all the contingencies. I think it's either, these are policies that are either you do it or you don't. And I think the way it's working now is work, and it's been fair for everyone.
Then why are we trying to change it?
Yeah, I'm confused.
I don't think we should.
If we don't, then they're ineligible.
Well, I mean,
No, but in the past, they weren't considered part-time.
yeah,
We didn't have them apply to be part-time, or we had them apply. Now we're, you know, like I said before, this is
Because
more
now
semantics.
now we're now we're enforcing something.
And we're enforcing, right. So, I don't see, if you think that that's not fair, that if they have two Ds that they can participate, right, is what you're saying, that you wanna tighten that up, their eligibility, instead of saying that if they have 3 Ds, right?
I
That's-
like the fact that if I look at this, that a student who is passing 75% of their classes can participate. That's the way, I'm trying to look at this more on the positive side of it. When can you participate?
So
You're
then,
passing
do we
75.
change the handbook and add something to the handbook and change it so that's more like this, 75% instead of a number of Ds?
That's
Put a
what I was saying.
percentage?
That's where I was struggling, is the fact that I felt that students could take fewer classes
Gotcha now.
and be accountable for passing fewer classes and still be able to participate alongside a full-time student who, at least in terms of district accountability,
Right.
is doing more. That's all I'm saying. For me, that was where I was struggling with these policies.
So instead of putting a number of Ds and Fs, put a percentage.
What
And then
I-
it would apply to both part-time if it's a percentage of their classes, right?
Well, I think we first have to decide whether or not, of the individuals who are here, if we are willing to entertain some type of a change to policy that allows for eligibility of non-public school students. I mean,
Well, yeah, I am, that's why I brought it up here,
Correct.
obviously.
You know, you are.
And I think that we took a poll before,
and
so.
it was my sense, is it, I mean,
please, I have a question.
please.
On the current policy, okay, which is 740, is there a difference between co-curricular and extracurricular? I know we've talked about these before.
Yes.
Co-curricular means like,
Co-curricular would be,
If you're in the math
correct me if
pool,
I'm wrong, would
math-
be like if the play was being sponsored as an extension of their English class. And they were in the English class, they are entitled to the opportunity to be eligible to participate in the play.
okay,
If, however, it's an extracurricular, where it's over and above the academic classes that they are enrolled in,
Like
then there
basketball.
is no obligation to provide them eligibility for participation.
because our current policy never addressed extracurricular. It only addressed co-curricular.
Well, it only said what they could do. It never said what they couldn't do. It always said he or she may participate only in those co-curricular activities associated with district classes in which he or she is enrolled. So it's always said, this is the only thing you can do.
And it
So
doesn't say what you
anything
can't
other
do.
than that, you can't. That's the, I believe,
I
that would
took
be
it
the
as anything
implication
other than
here.
that was, it's not, you
Right,
could.
It's not in black and white.
It's not in black and white, so.
I would defer to you, Terry, as to how press.
Well, the interpretation of the school code provision that allows part-time attendance is to your curriculum classes only. It doesn't extend to the extracurriculars. So the right to attend part-time is the right to attend the regular school day.
And it is then the right to also participate in any co-curriculars that are associated with the
With the
classes
class.
that you attend.
Right.
Beyond that, the interpretation is, there is
Right.
no expectation that they should be, or that they are allowed to.
And I'm gonna guess that that's why this is a model policy. why they added that to, you know, well, we're adding it to our policy, but it was a part of the model policy.
It was part of model, yeah, when we looked at it, so obviously, and I know Terry has brought that up
Let's
before
address
from
that.
what she is seeing, that it's something that districts are struggling with.
Right, right, we can make a decision.
And so we want to add in the part of extracurricular activities, so we spell it out.
Correct.
And that's what Karen is proposing.
And so what Leanne is struggling with is what makes them eligible academically, so if you guys are okay with adding this, you would feel more comfortable if we added that we put in maybe a percentage would cover both part-time and full-time
For
enrollment.
me personally, but again, it's just,
think that
it's
would be
just
fair.
me, and that doesn't
wanna
mean,
look at
you know,
percentage?
everybody's got to agree with it.
How do you feel, Beth?
I just wanna confirm here, so when we're talking about the activities, we're not talking about volleyball team and
Well,
that
that's
kind
your
of thing.
interscholastic competition, provided his or her participation adheres to the regulations established by any association in which the school district maintains a membership. Keeping in mind, Mark did provide us with some information in the past where I believe there was one organization where if a student was being homeschooled, the responsibility fell on the administrative staff in order to validate certain academic expectations in order to say that that student could participate. So we are talking volleyball, we are talking basketball, we are talking softball, because that's the interscholastic competition part of this.
And the extracurricular, so the cheerleading or,
Yeah, dances or whatever.
I would say choir too.
That's sponsored by the school, not necessarily PTA. This is
Correct.
run
Right.
by the school.
So what it boils down to is, do we want to entertain adding this? If we do want to entertain adding it, are we comfortable with the way it is written? And then does anybody, if we are going to add it, do we feel that there should be a change then to the handbook? That's where I think we're going with this. We either leave it alone, in which case it doesn't get proposed. We know Karen's an advocate of it because she brought it. I've heard Gina say that you would be willing to,
Yeah.
look into this. Beth, your sense is?
Well, I'd be willing to look into it, but I do have a concern with what you had talked about as far as percentages of, I just don't feel like if somebody's here full-time and taking 8 classes or whatever it may be, and they have to carry this, somebody's here for 3 or 4 classes and one of them is art, one of them is PE, and one is math, and one is whatever. I mean, really, odds are, what class could they perhaps get a D in? They're not gonna, more than likely, get 3 Ds and those kind of subjects. So that's where I really struggle with this, is I don't feel that it's fair
Well, if you look
in that
at,
aspect.
if you look at the policy, it says 1/2 of the regular day, not 3 or 4. I mean, it doesn't say like less than half. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right,
So
it's
the
for,
half would be
it's
4
for at
classes.
least.
It's for at least 4.
Right. And I can tell you, for me, I would feel more comfortable if that was increased. I would like to see a higher number there. But
5? I don't know.
I wrote 2/3, because I kind of feel like, 2/3 is your 67%, and that's kind of,
That'd be 6 of 8. My math serves me correctly. You're the math expert.
it doesn't mean a heck, I always get it straight, but pretty close, if it's 2/3.
I mean,
Especially if you're including some people in music
That's how I felt about it as well,
or arts
yes.
and music.
If you go to 2/3, the likelihood that it would all be the specials is diminished. It is highly likely then that there would be more core classes that would go along with that. That was my thought there, is if there was a way we could raise that. And to be honest with you, I felt like if we could go up to 2/3 there, that maybe then the way the eligibility is written is not so bad. But reducing this down to only 4, I did not felt it went hand in hand with the eligibility. So, that was me. Lisa?
Yeah, I like the idea of moving it up to 2/3 for sure. And, I would like to say, make sure that if we make a change in our academic eligibility rules, that whatever that change is, that at the end of the red paragraph, we indicate as stated in the parent-student handbook, page 7. So that it's clear, so people have a frame of reference. But yeah, I do, you know, there just needs to be some level of equality. I mean, a kid that's coming here for 4 classes, even 5 classes, getting 2 Ds. Quite frankly, if it were my kid that did 2 Ds in their report card, if they were taking 8 classes, they'd be sitting home anyway, you know, doing homework. But, you know, you can't guarantee that, so if it's spelled out in writing, at least everybody knows what the rules are.
And Karen, I know you kind of, you know, thrown out numbers before, and you know,
I'm
like
fine.
whether it's 50 or 60, just what are we
Let's just
comfortable
get
with?
it passed,
you
whatever
know?
it's gonna take to get it, everyone to pass this.
This is
Or
what,
this
I would like to propose, and I'd like to just move things around just a little bit with this, if you could.
6 out of 8.
Would be 6. A non-public school student who attends a district school for at least 2/3 of the regular school day, excluding lunch, is eligible to participate in interscholastic competition provided his or her participation adheres to the regulations established by any association in which the school district maintains a membership, and 2, non-athletic extracurricular activities. By moving, I think, the attendance requirement up, it puts the attendance as the priority. You first and foremost have to be here for a minimum of 2/3, and then in addition to that, whatever other requirements are set forth by the interscholastic competition. Terry, do you think there would be an issue with that?
Well, I was concerned because I didn't know where that dangling at least 1/2, whether it modified both section 1 and section 2.
Where it is at the end, I think is quite questionable, so that's what I'd
Yeah,
like to
the only
propose,
thing I
maybe moving
don't
it up.
know is whether your interscholastic groups have regulations that differ.
And I think at that
I
point,
just don't know.
you would almost have to, you're gonna almost have to go with the different organizations. We know that already exists, because I know when I had asked Mark to look into this, I don't remember if that was for Scholastic Bowl, that you had found
The
the one, but.
organization is ESA, the
ESA.
Illinois Elementary Scholastic Association. I should put this in.
So yes, it is gonna put the responsibility on the district to ensure that if they are part-time student, that they also adhere with any other requirements that might be set forth. Are we comfortable with that? Can we propose that? And then if it's gonna be 2/3, I can just say for myself, because I was doing the numbers before I came here, I'm okay with leaving it at 3 Ds for now, and then we can kind of see from there. Is that okay? All right.
Could you review what you're recommending again with the language?
Okay. A non-public school student who attends a district school for at least 2/3 of the regular school day, excluding lunch, is eligible to participate in interscholastic competition provided his or her participation adheres to the regulations established by any association in which the school district maintains a membership, and 2, non-athletic extracurricular activities. And then in the last sentence, a non-public school student who participates, and I think we should just say in an activity, is subject to all policies, regulations, and rules that are applicable to other participants in this activity. And as Lisa requested somewhere there, we could say, refer to parent-student handbook, page 7. Okay? I think it is on that one. Okay. We can move on to the next policy then, 7165.
The language that's in there, Leandra and I crafted at the direction of the board to make it clear in terms of eligibility for getting a diploma and for the graduation ceremony. And I think the language that's here is good, and I recommend that the board adopt that.
Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and throw my thoughts out here first again. And I've done a lot of thinking on this. Obviously, when Mark and I first met and we crafted the policy, we asked for input from administration. And we kind of came in here blindly with, here's our thoughts. Concerns were raised at the last board meeting. Beth, I know you had kind of reiterated the fact that you wish it were black and white. You wish that it was this clear, but it's not. And sometimes we do have those gray areas. I spent some time before tonight's meeting, which is why I got here at 6:57, trying to put my thoughts together. So I have handwritten thoughts because I thought it would be easier to convey those to the board. However, I will respect the board's decision if you would not allow me to pass this out because I'm bringing it to a board meeting. If, however, you feel comfortable enough with me sharing my thoughts with you on a written sheet of paper, I am hoping that I addressed what I heard at the last meeting and it would give us a basis for a discussion that might be different than the policy that's here. So I'm going to ask the board for that.
That's fine, yeah.
Do you mind?
No, not at all.
Okay. And,
Well, you're passing it out. I thought you said you weren't passing it.
oh no, I was asking for permission to pass it out because I'm bringing it to tonight's meeting. meeting.
I thought you said you didn't have anything to pass out.
Oh,
I'm
no,
like, that's
I do,
fine.
but it's all handwritten and it's not very pretty. So, I apologize, but I truly was last minute doing this.
I'm gonna be checking for spelling and grammar.
Please don't. There's scratch outs and there's
The
everything.
teacher and me,
Scratch
sorry.
outs and everything. My personal opinion as I was reviewing this is I felt that we had two situations going on here. Whether or not a diploma or a certificate of attendance would be issued and whether or not there would be participation in the graduation ceremony. Reading through the proposed policy last month, this is something that I thought might work. If we look at the opening sentence and it says grade 8 students are expected to meet academic and behavioral expectations to earn a diploma and participate in the graduation ceremony. Then I'm going to ask if the board could go down to my handwritten notes underneath revised, specifically, and 1 through 4, order doesn't matter, but non-public school students who have been accepted to attend Pleasantdale Middle School on a part-time basis during 8th grade will not receive a diploma and will be issued a certificate of attendance. Number 2, 8th graders who are enrolled for less than, and I am proposing 2 trimesters as opposed to 1, who are enrolled for less than 2 trimesters will not receive a diploma and will be issued a certificate of attendance. 3, 8th graders who have exhibited incidents of gross disobedience and misconduct will be issued a certificate of attendance. And 4, 8th graders who earn 6 or more Fs during the school year, with at least 1 F occurring during the 3rd trimester, will be issued a certificate of attendance. What I tried to do was spell out the conditions under which a certificate of attendance would be received versus a diploma. Then I have down my furthermore. 8th graders who earn a certificate of attendance may, not unconditionally will, may, be ineligible to participate in the graduation ceremony. And then I have 3 bullet points. If a student is ineligible due to attendance, my thought was that was items 1 and 2. A decision will be made by superintendent or designee. Now, Beth brought up again, I'm going to defer to you again, Beth, the fact that it's not black and white. If something is gray, then someone's got to make the decision. If we can't come up with an unconditional, this is the way it's always going to be, then someone's got to make that decision. I am recommending, as we do in many other policies, that that decision be made by the superintendent or their designee. We've seen it before in policy. Then the second bullet, if a student is ineligible due to behavior, a plan to remediate will be developed jointly between the student, parent, and school.
Failure to remediate their behavior given adequate notice will prohibit a student from participating in the graduation ceremony. That is pretty much what was in there before, it's just spelled out more, in more detail. And then finally, the last one, I hope I captured everything that was already in the policy, and that is if a student is ineligible due to academic performance, parents will be notified at the end of the trimester in which 2 or more Fs are accumulated on the report card. A plan to remediate will be developed jointly between the student, parent, and school. Failure to remediate given adequate notice will prohibit a student from participating in the graduation ceremony. This is what I'd like to propose tonight.
Write it up. I just have one quick question.
Oh,
So,
go ahead.
As far as the first bullet point, furthermore, the section is the students
Yeah.
on due to attendance. I'm just curious, what defines like attendance? Like, I mean, how many days
Well,
do you find attendance? You know what I'm saying?
I'm going back to number 1 and 2.
Okay, let me go back to that then.
Non-public, will not receive a diploma. Basically, anyone who is homeschooled, they're gonna get a certificate of attendance. The way we had the policy that we brought to you last month, we stipulated that they would not participate in the ceremony.
Right.
What I'm suggesting is that if we do have those gray areas, that we give the authority to the administrative staff to make a decision. And then 8th graders who are enrolled for less than 2 trimesters, I just felt that if we go 2/3 on participating in extracurriculars, that a student who is here for 2 trimesters is here for 2/3 of the academic year.
Okay,
So I
so-
kind of looked at it that way.
So you're saying like attendance would mean basically 2 trimesters? Is that what you're saying?
1 and 2. Because if a
I don't-
student
yeah,
is,
I'm lost then.
okay, go to number 1. If it's
No, we're not
not
under specifically?
non-public school, if a student is non-public, and we agree to what we just talked about 5 minutes ago, we raise the participation for extracurricular to 2/3, right?
Okay, yes.
So eligible for 2/3. Now, that doesn't mean that a student has to be here for 2/3. They could be here for 1 class. But truth be told, we either have to build into policy a very restrictive requirement saying, if you're here for 1 class, you can't go to the graduation. If you're here for 2 classes, you can't go. If you're here for 3, you can't go. If you're here for 4, you can't. And if we're not going to do that, I am simply saying that for non-public school students, because that's an attendance issue, and 8th graders who weren't here the whole year, that's also an attendance issue, to defer to the administrative staff to
Okay,
make
so
that
that's just,
decision.
okay, so basically this just refers to non-public, not just students in general. I mean, I guess
Correct.
I'm just,
Not
I was
students
just
in
confused, like
general.
if a kid is sick, say they have leukemia and they miss
But
most
no,
of the
but
year,
it says
that's
8th
what I'm
graders
concerned.
who earn a certificate of attendance. So everything underneath this is for those students who have earned a certificate of attendance, not for students who are earning a diploma.
Okay,
So I tried to write this so it only applied to items 1, 2, 3, 4, and above. Because that's really what happens. And Meg, please correct me if I'm wrong. If a student does not participate in the graduation ceremony, they don't get a diploma, but they do get a certificate of attendance.
Correct.
Okay. So what I tried to do was spell out the reasons by which a certificate of attendance could be earned. And for all of those, whether or not they would be eligible to participate in the graduation ceremony.
okay.
You know what, I just couldn't come up
Yeah,
with
no, I
any other
understand, I was just a little
way.
confused, but I mean, but that's fine.
Based upon what I heard last month, I was just trying to come up with something that I thought captured the sense and the feel for many of the board members. I don't know if this has done it.
Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Oh.
Where it says a student is ineligible due to attendance, am I understanding that to be, they were an 8th grader who came, for example, in the 2nd semester,
Yes,
or they are a homeschooled
yes.
who comes, and you're saying in all those circumstances, it would be the discretion of the superintendent and the designee whether they should participate in the graduation.
Mark, I don't know how else to do it. I really don't.
Yeah, well,
You know,
here's I think the point I'm trying to make on this and why I think you get in some, dangerous,
We are.
what, I don't know if we are or not. You either attend, where you take the gray out of it, is either you're a full-time student or you're not. That's the only way you take the gray out of it.
Right.
So that's why,
Which would mean that
I
a
don't think you
student
can
who
look at
comes in-
this and be thinking about any single student.
No, I agree with you, and I'm not, it's not how I am looking at this. Even, and I know, Mark, you mentioned last month that somebody asked about LT, and I didn't bring their academic program guide with me, but even there where they list eligibility for graduation, I can't even remember what the word is, but it's either like generally, or typically, or in most circumstances. There's even a gray area in what LT has in their academic program guide that says somebody is gonna be eligible to graduate or not.
Right, but we also learned a number of months ago that the rules are different for high school than grammar school. So we really can't compare to LT, we have to compare elsewhere.
So,
Please don't.
anyway, this is just what I'm proposing.
No, I'm just saying, if you can't even say compare to LT because the rules are different for a high school student than they are, that's what we were advised, correct?
You mean on graduation requirements?
No, just on attendance period. Attendance and whether they're allowed to be absent, from school and still be registered and all that kind of good stuff.
No.
Oh my gosh, yes.
No,
Yes.
these have come up, but, there have been questions as to whether or not certain rules have been met. Maybe the law says one thing, but I think the question is whether or not schools sometimes then
Do it differently, correct. The law defines truancy the same way, it defines part-time attendance the same way for K to 12. If that's what you're asking, Mark.
That's what I'm asking, but I
It's the same.
swear that you gave us something that said, oh no, and there was a whole discussion that high school was different than grammar school.
Does it have to do with athletics, though?
No, well, this
No?
doesn't have to do with that.
No, I didn't know if that's what Terry was referring to.
Yeah, I'm drawing a
But-
blank.
I'll
because
have to
the
go
law's the
back and
same.
research them.
But again, kind of going back to last month and what we had here, and the fact that administration said, okay, when is somebody gonna be able to graduate, not graduate, if they're here for one trimester? If they're here for one trimester, it's 1/3 of the year. If we have a student who is here for a minimum of 2/3 of the academic day, then over the course of a year, they're here for 2/3 of the class year. And we're saying that they can't, and somebody who's here for one trimester can, it doesn't sit right with me. So, in the end, this is what I'm comfortable with. If you guys don't like it, it's fine.
I was comfortable without any of it. Just leave it as it was before. It worked fine without any of this adding, and it was kind of left to the discretion. It wasn't black and white, because it is so hard to put in black and white. And I think we're talking about maybe one instance that might come up in another year or two so far with someone who's asked to participate in a graduation ceremony, where it doesn't say they can't. It doesn't say they can, so again, it's kind of backs up to the discretion of the district, which is basically what you're saying in 10 different steps. So if you leave it out and leave it open, you're not saying yes or no.
Right, because even with, even if we took the specifically 4 points, down in the furthermore, the second bullet point, what if that behavior occurred in the last week of school?
Meg, you've been in this situation now, because that's already in
Yes.
policy.
No, but what I'm driving at is here you're saying, well, no, we're gonna put a plan in place after we meet with the parents so that you can remediate it. That's what this bullet point is saying.
Meg?
It has happened.
Does Meg have this in front of her?
She does.
Yes.
I can honestly admit that I did ask her to look at it
Okay.
at 2 minutes before the meeting started, and thank you, Meg, for doing that for me.
Okay, Meg?
Has it ever happened that the behavior occurred a few days before graduation? Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
it
correct,
has.
no, I know it has, I know
Yeah.
it has. What I'm saying is, this is saying, hey, we're gonna meet with the parents, we're gonna put a plan in place to remediate it, and then you can attend the ceremony. And I'm saying is, if it happens 2 days before graduation, is there enough time to put a plan in
No.
place?
So
So then.
which makes this null and void, so you're back to the discretion of the superintendent, which is,
What we were before.
which is where we were before, correct? Which means we've tried to take a gray area, get very specific with it, and left it gray when we were done.
You're right.
So why
Different shape.
even do this?
That's how I
Would be
feel.
my recommendation.
Let's do it.
Okay, so without it, if we do absolutely nothing and we leave policy alone, what does it mean?
What it's meant in the past, it's kind of been up to the discretion of the superintendent. That's all right. That's pretty much how it's handled in the past.
I don't know, has it?
Well, in the case of the student coming at, we haven't had an incident where we've had a student come like in the very end of 8th grade and then expected to graduate, but we could. So I do think it makes sense to say, here's how we're gonna handle that. Anytime you have unnecessary discretion, you have perceived inequity, and that's inevitable. And it is somewhat arbitrary to say 1 trimester, 2 trimesters. If it's 2, that's fine. If it's 1, that's fine as well. But at least I think that part we should be definitive in case it does happen. Then you're not dealing with somebody making a request when there's no policy. So I think at least in that regard.
But then you're not leaving yourself the opportunity, if they come in and they've got full grades, they were fully enrolled at a different school, they moved into the district, it's not that they were homeschooled and they, but they moved in, maybe dad transferred, whatever, halfway through the year, we put this in, then they can't graduate. But they've done everything, they've met all the requirements of graduation based off their previous history, right? They come in with their grades, blah, blah, blah. They're exemplary students, they might wanna graduate. You put it in there, then you're gonna say, no, you can't.
Right.
So I think you're better off just leaving it. I don't think it happens often enough where it's, we're gonna have lawsuits because we weren't fair and equitable across the board. And I think it's something that's happened behind the scenes that nobody really knows. I don't know how many times it's happened where you might have had to say, sorry, you're not gonna graduate. And with those cases, with the kids that might have behavior problems, do they really wanna graduate with the class? Probably not. I mean, so why even put it in there? I don't know, it's Kelly.
Probably not, no.
Probably not. They couldn't care less,
Of
I
course
just
they
wanna get the heck out of here, right? I mean, so I think that we're making ourselves, it's not the catch-all that we hoped it to be, so why even bother? That's just my opinion. You wanna take a poll so we can move on, or what?
Well, I know Mark is proposing that we at least leave item 2 in from the original Mark.
And Karen, to your point.
Which Mark?
We said,
It's Mark.
we picked 1 trimester because it would seem reasonable if you came at the tail end of the year, there'd be no expectation of a diploma. When you look at 2 trimesters, then you might say, per your comments, that, well, we were at Gower, now we're here. Because we moved in the middle of the year. Well, that's when you might say, well, okay, so you're in good standing there. Through no fault of your own, you started, you've got 2 semesters under your belt. Maybe 1 trimester, or what trimester, I have to say. Maybe 1 trimester makes more sense than 2. I don't care. I think it should at least have something in there regarding that.
But they won't participate in a graduation ceremony or receive a diploma. I thought they said,
That's what number 2 says. So number 2 says it.
go back to the original policy.
Correct.
What Mark Fredensdorf is asking, that he feels that at least we need that.
That's in the,
What was proposed last month.
yeah.
He at least would like to see number 2, and what I'm hearing from Karen is she wants to strike number 1.
Definitely.
But then, number 2 is fine as long, I would like to see him participate in graduation ceremonies, not necessarily receive a diploma from us, because we don't, but maybe a certificate of attendance, because, I don't know, I just would feel terrible if a student, a new student moved in April because they're, like you said, their parent got transferred, and then all of a sudden, you're not allowed to participate, but you can go on the 8th grade trip, you can do everything else, but you can't, I don't know, I'm more for about the kids, and trying to, I don't know, I just think, let them participate, give them a certificate of diploma, just take out the the certificate of attendance,
Right,
take
when
out the
is-
diploma.
When is ISAT?
March.
March.
And is that the end of the second or beginning of the third trimester?
It's middle of the third, or not the middle, but the beginning of the, I think February.
Should be.
Should be
I don't know.
February?
It'd
You
be
have the date
interesting
of the
because if they
second
came here from
trimester.
Florida, let's say,
Yeah.
and they were an exceptional student, and they moved in, we'd give them the ISAT and count them in our average.
Well, we would do.
And now we brag about it.
If they're
Everyone
forced
else
to-
graduates.
Exactly, exactly.
And if they came from Florida in 2 years, we would all take the same test, because it would be the Common Core.
I'm not getting into like 2 or 3 years.
I'm just saying.
A million things can happen between now and then.
That's why I think you're better off just leaving it to the discretion.
If they came
That's what
from
we've done
Florida,
for
I'd ask
years.
them why they came.
Unfortunately, everything's not black and white. People have to make these hard
But
decisions.
this is pretty black and
It
white.
never is black and white.
That's right.
But this one is black and white.
That's what I'm saying. I said I don't like it, take it out.
But that's,
So,
you take out 2 as well.
yeah. How often does it happen? It's not a big deal. I mean, we're making it a big deal.
Do we have any numbers on how often it's happened in the last 10 years?
Which one?
Either of them. How often has someone come in the last trimester and not been allowed to graduate in the last 10 years?
It hasn't happened.
Okay. And how often has a non?
Wait, did you say trimester?
Well, that's what it says here.
Right. Not to my knowledge.
Okay. So, I mean, like, if it's
That's
not
why you
broke,
get
don't
paid the
fix
big
it.
bucks,
I
Mark,
think
to make
just-
these hard decisions every 10 years. I don't think, it's not.
It's not that big of a deal.
I don't think that we want to pigeonhole ourselves or make it so tight, so black and white, because it's not black and white.
It's not. Every kid is different.
That's right.
Everyone has a
And
different
every
situation.
situation's different, and it's not, like I said, I think we've had this like for the last 6 months. I'm kind of getting sick of it. So pardon
Actually,
me.
we haven't.
4 months.
This policy last month was the first time. This was graduation.
Oh, I think you're right. I mean, but the topic of
Yes.
non-public has been around, I think that's where she was at.
Nauseam. I'm sorry.
You're both right.
Should we take straw poll?
Yes, please.
I'm not sure what the straw poll is. Mark,
If
you
we're gonna
wanna-
put it in at
If
all.
we're gonna pull 1 and 2 of the existing, or the proposed policy. Karen, you'd like to remove both? You
Yes,
just like to
please.
put it back to the way it is?
Yes.
The way it was. Lise,
I can say yes.
put it back to the way it was?
Back to the way it was.
Beth?
I just had a question. Where, so in this one that we're looking at, that we added 1 and 2, Karen, you said, and maybe I'm just trying to read it too quickly, that it says up to the discretion of?
It doesn't say that.
It doesn't, that's just been past practice.
Okay, so it's not in there, it's just past practice.
In the sense that
comes
if it
up.
came up, they would just have to handle it.
Right.
Okay. Then, in that case, I'm fine with leaving it as is without the 1 and 2.
Pulling it? Mark Mirably? Make sense?
I'm fine with leaving it the
Going
way
back
it
to the way
used
it
to be.
was? Okay. All right. Then, since it's already gray, it's gonna stay gray.
Thank you.
No attempt to make it more black and white is helpful. All right.
Next policy is.
Termination, oh, no, not termination, 2140, Karen?
I think it was just semantics that we had board members here, I've got it in my notes. The first bullet, where it says, email with constituent, should be kept private between the constituent and the Board of Ed member. Board members may reply. That was a contradiction of what it says before. We had talked about will not reply or forward, but may reply only to the sender. Because, like I said prior, it says that you will not reply to these board members.
Wait.
So the second line, board members will not reply, and that's just what I had in my notes, I thought. Or forward to all, but may reply only to the sender.
So board members may reply or forward to all.
Cross out the may and put will not reply, or forward to all. But may reply only to the sender. Because remember, we're not gonna send it out to everybody as a board member. So we don't wanna reply or forward to all. I thought that's what we talked about, that we're not gonna ever reply to all, because that's why I got spanked at one time, because I hit reply to all. Remember? That everything has to go back through Mark,
This is with a constituent.
Right, so we don't wanna forward everything from a constituent to all, right? We may reply back to the constituent, but not to everyone else. It goes to Mark. That's how I understood it, I might be wrong.
I think that's.
The board member should act to guide the constituent toward resolution, but should not act on their behalf. Email will not be deleted. Email sent to the board at main email address will be forwarded to all members in process per policy 811, which is the one that says everything has to go through Mark. So that's why I thought the board members may reply to all or forward to all was misleading, because that's a contradiction to what we talked about before. But
So
that,
you want that to say board members may reply only to sender?
yeah, that's fine. May reply only to sender. Do you guys agree that that's what we talked about before?
It
Okay.
clears it up.
So we'll say board, go ahead.
Board members may reply only to
sender.
sender.
I just have one clarity question for you, because certain constituents will communicate with a board member and clearly expect it to be private. But oftentimes you will get a citizen contacting a particular board member saying, it's because I know you and I want you to share it with the board. So do you need, in this first bullet, to make it clear then that the board member should forward it to the SOUP or forwarding it to the board? The way I now read the first bullet is every email between the board member and constituent must be kept private. And I don't think that's the way it works necessarily.
But if a individual wants something to be advanced, the board member should guide them toward the proper process of doing so and should not act on their behalf.
I agree, it's just that if you read that bullet alone, I'm not sure you would recognize that's an option, because this just says it should be kept private. At least that's how I read it, so.
Up above that first paragraph, if contacted individually, board members will refer the person to the appropriate level of authority except in unusual situations.
But even the bullet after that one, Karen, that you were proposing to change to, that's where it says specifically, they should act to guide.
Right, I mean, so it's there, but, and so you know, I guess at 811 would be helpful. It's in the brochure, but I'm pretty sure in there it says everything has to go through the superintendent. I don't know, that's just what I had in my notes.
So it's our understanding, though, that the board members will not forward emails from the constituent to the superintendent.
Right.
That if this individual wants that to go to the full board, that we will tell them that they need to initiate that correspondence. Yes, no?
I just think that's difficult sometimes, that you should consider that with the community. I mean, because they will be coming to you for a certain reason, whatever that might be.
So we'll go back to conversations we've had at the board level in the past, and that is as an individual at that point in time, you have no power.
Right.
So if something needs to be addressed, it really needs to go to the proper authority.
Oh, it has to get there. Yeah, I just don't want that to be read as a restriction, because it just clearly says it should be private. I think you know what to do with it. But as a reader, to me, it just says everything's gonna be private. I don't make that leap. That,
So Terry, you're suggesting that it should be clear that a board member can forward an email from a constituent to the superintendent for distribution
yeah,
to all
that's what
board
I think
members.
is missing somewhere.
Because that may be something
I'm sure
somebody
it's in
wants to
policy
do.
811 too, but I don't have it.
I'm sorry.
I'm sure that that's what it states in policy 811. Where it says email sent
we
to the
look
board.
that up?
At main, do you have it? Could
I
you-
can look it up.
The main email address will be forwarded to all members in process per policy 811 and Board of Ed brochure. Which I'm pretty sure that's
See,
what it
but
says.
that's the main email address.
Right.
That's not our personal one.
Okay.
And the first bullet is referring
Just
to
for
us
the personal.
personally, yeah.
I know somewhere it says anything forwarded has to go, we forward it on.
Well, would it do it to say board members may reply only to sender and may forward to the superintendent for distribution to all board members.
Okay.
I don't agree with that.
You don't?
No, now you're getting the board's voice, you're getting the one individual board member's voice out on an issue. If a constituent is communicating with you, and
Mhm.
you are replying back, whether you're commiserating with them or what have you, you now have a voice. So if you take that and you send it to the superintendent and you say forward it to everybody, that board member's opinion is now known. And something that may or may not be elevated to the board level. Where do you go with it?
And I'm not jumping at all, Leandra. And I don't want to in any way give my opinion. I'm just envisioning a member of the community saying, I know you, Leandra, I have this concern that I wish the board would consider. You might reply, I don't know if you reply or not, but how do you as a board member then
You ask them
get
to
that?
email the board at their main email address.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And I think that that's the position we've got to keep.
Do you want me to read policy 811?
Is that what it says, right?
It says the school board is interested in receiving feedback from members of the community. All feedback will be referred to the appropriate level, staff member or district administrator per published communication procedures. All feedback shall be considered on its merit. An individual who is not satisfied after following channels of authority may file a grievance under the uniform complaint policy. But I think we changed our policy, so I think this policy needs to be changed. But anyways, this policy shall not be construed to create an independent right to a hearing before the board.
This was a huge conversation, and I don't recall what we wound up with, but the D107 individual accounts, are those published?
What do you mean by published, Mark?
I put my hand up, yeah.
The individual accounts,
I think so.
the collective account is published, are the individual accounts published? Because I thought that discussion was.
They're in the calendar and the
They're in the
handbook.
calendar.
They are, okay.
Okay, so where we are with this is,
I just think it needs to say board members may reply only to sender.
okay.
And then the other note that I had on there, because, and this is what I thought we had talked about, the last, second to last, board members send all district, I had in my notes, board members should send all district-related email correspondence solely through their district account, so that's maintained. I thought we had an option, to use other emails to send them to the district account. You know, when we set up our own individual accounts, our own emails through whatever it is, that we had it that was optional. We had a choice.
That wasn't my understanding. My understanding was that we had our Board of Education email addresses for, because it would be a better accounting of correspondence, as opposed to somebody sending it from home or somebody sending something from a work address. You know, all you have to do is go onto the Rackspace account, pull up it's very simple to do from wherever you are, so that should be a non-issue. It's really an accountability thing.
But if we're sending it, so it's really not that easy for me to do from my BlackBerry, where I can send from my BlackBerry to Mark, whatever. And it's saved because I'm sending it to the Rackspace account. So as far as accountability, it's being stored, it's being saved because it's going to that. But the source, I didn't think that we had to use ours as the source for everything. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I thought it should be.
I thought the whole reason why we
should send.
set these up was so that was going to be our main flow of communication. That was the only address that we were going to be using, was our Rackspace address, that was why we did it.
Right, but
Why
I'll
we
go so
got it.
far, I'll go
It
so
was
far
optional.
as to agree with what you're saying, but I now
What?
monitor that account much, much less
Absolutely.
than when it went elsewhere, because for the most part, I live and die on email on this thing,
Me too.
and Rackspace doesn't work on mobile devices unless you pay extra for it.
Right.
And
I
apparently
can't-
we have not. So I literally have to be in front of a computer
Me
now, somewhere to log in order to see email.
I think
So-
as long as it's going to him, it's automatically archived.
Right, and so I
So-
can send
And I,
something.
really no
and I would
big
prefer
deal.
not to bring it to a personal device. I'd prefer to go and have, ask Mark to ask John McAtee to see what it's gonna take to make it work on mobile
Well, we
devices.
can certainly make sure it does, but I wish this was an issue the board would be together on. because we've had a lot of discussion on this, and I know that, I don't want to speak for Rick, he's not here, but I mean, this was the big issue is that all board emails should be on board email addresses, and that the board was committed to that. It wasn't a take it or leave it.
Right.
Because as soon as it's take it or leave it, then other issues will come up about how something was sent and whether it was properly archived in a way that can't be monitored.
Becomes an
and that kind of
accountability
thing.
issue.
Right, no, I agree with that, I agree with that. I would just like to see if we can get it working on.
Yeah, oh yeah,
multiple
absolutely.
devices. But I do agree that the whole
I didn't even know it didn't work
discussion-
on your mobile device.
It wouldn't work on yours either unless you paid for it.
I
I mean,
just
it
check
literally, when you
check it
go
in the
to,
morning and I
set
check
it up, it
beginning
tells
of
you
the day and I
there's a
check it
fee.
at the end of the day. I check
So-
it twice a day.
Oh, okay.
So,
You check rag space twice a day?
I do. I check it
I
in
never
the
check
morning
it.
and I
haven't
check it
in
at the
6
end of the
months
day.
because it's always forwarded. I never check.
I'm sorry?
All right,
Listen,
but
I
that's
know.
what it is, that's what it is, so that's
But
what I
we
went to
did,
that.
we did have the discussion that we commit to that one, because I know it centered around a recent, legal issue, not here, but, which was in the paper about, now they're gonna go back, they're gonna have to look at your home computer,
Right.
your this, that, and the other, and it was like, okay, let's all move to a district email address, be done. And we all did agree to that, so I do agree with that. I would just.
So
Yeah,
we'll leave it as is.
That's fine.
Except we'll make the one change that Karen proposed,
Okay.
and you'll look into seeing whether or not there's a way to bring rec space down to mobile devices, and what that would involve.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I'm glad I'm aware of that, I'm sorry it wasn't working.
Are we not- Are we discussing the whole policy or just a few things? in the
Well,
policy?
these were the things that I thought Karen had proposed,
Yeah.
right? Is there
That's
anything
what
else
I
on
had.
this one?
Well, like, on the board member use of electronic communications, that sentence structure such as, that needs to be changed, it's kind of confusing. I had to read it several times.
Where is it, Gina?
Such as, in the middle where the bullets are, the 4 bullets. Email on board members shall be limited to disseminating information and messages not involving deliberation, debate, or decision-making. Such as, I mean, the sentence structure is wrong, so it needs to be written differently, because it's
What
sort
are
of
you,
confusing.
what are you proposing?
Well, now that you ask me, I don't know, but I have to read it several times, because that's how I do things. Shall be limited to, and messages not involving debate. And then, period where it says it is, and then, items
You want a
that,
for example?
for
That's
example,
all it is, okay.
something like that.
Well, if I recall the press policy, and this may just be a typo, those bullets modify to. They're examples of messages not involving deliberation, debate, or decision.
Those
So then
refer to
we
So
should
you
take
should
out
put a
shots.
comma after decision-making,
And then-
comma, lowercase, such as.
Okay,
That's-
thank you. I knew there was, I had to read it several times, and I wasn't sure if it modified number 1 or number 2, and that's why I said something wrong with this. And then, the other thing I had was that at the top, I don't know, like the fourth or fifth sentence, the superintendent shall provide the board with a summary of the question. Can we get the actual question, or like instead of a summary?
Where are we at?
Staff members and community members should submit questions or communications for the school board's consideration to the superintendent. The board will have a single and published email address. The superintendent, although we don't really have a single and published, because didn't you just say it's in?
We do, as a board, we still do.
We still do? Okay. The board will have a single and published, the superintendent will disseminate all communications sent to this address and to all board members. The superintendent shall provide the board with a summary of these questions or communications. Can we get the actual question, or, rather than a summary? Can we just take out the word summary? The superintendent shall provide the board with these questions.
It's fine with me. Less work for the superintendent, it's for.
Yeah, then he has to summarize, rather than summarize, just forward the actual thing.
You could just say the superintendent will forward these questions or communications and provide as appropriate his or her feedback.
I can't hear you, sorry.
You could just say the superintendent will forward these questions or communications and
Yeah.
provide as appropriate his or her feedback regarding the matter.
Now, does he provide the feedback to us or to the person that wrote the letter?
Depends on the situation.
Either.
I mean, it's
I don't know,
kind of
I just-
redundant. I think it's trying to say two different things, because what you're attempting to do in that sentence is basically redundant to the sentence right above it. I mean, it already
So then maybe we
says,
should
the
take that sentence
superintendent
out.
will disseminate all communication sent to this address to all board members.
Yeah, you could, I think the second sentence should just go.
Just take that sentence out?
It's a discretionary issue anyway, so it's not a
And,
matter
or
of
you,
policy.
and then you could just put and provide as appropriate his or her feedback regarding the matter.
Right, that's what I think the summary is pertaining to, is
Mm.
his or her feedback, not what actually came in.
Yeah, but I don't
Okay,
think
that
that's a
wasn't
matter
clear,
of
so that's
policy.
No,
why I just was
understood,
like,
but that's
yes.
what
I think you
I
can
think is
just-
actually taking place there.
Yeah, I think you can just take that out. It doesn't add anything.
Now, does the summary, I mean, does the feedback, you said it goes back to us or to the person that wrote to you?
Well, I think you can take that sentence out because
The whole
it's vague,
sentence? Okay,
and it's not a matter of policy anyway, it's not a definitive
okay.
act.
So you're gonna scratch that whole sentence.
Well, what it was, Mark, was a way that you were able to tell the board when you did handle something. Because, you know, let's keep in mind, you might receive a communication and you might choose to respond to that individual by phone. The board's gonna have no way of knowing whether or not you have followed up with them
That's-
unless you provide that summary.
Right, that's what I'm
So I
driving at, is the
understand
summary
when you
was
say-
actually his going out, not what was coming in.
Yeah.
So I think the sentence remains, it just gets reworded, so it's superintendent's response will be summarized
Yes.
And,
to the board.
And it may not be summarized, it may be in its entirety.
It
That's
could be,
fine. May or
but
may
at the
not be,
very
is
least-
good enough.
and the other question I had.
So you give it to me again, Mark.
All right, read it, I'm going to.
The superintendent, okay, the superintendent's,
The superintendent's response,
So the superintendent shall provide the board with a summary, when appropriate, of his or her feedback regarding
Right.
matters, something like that.
with a summary and/or actual detail, because I think that's what you were driving at, is it may not be summary.
Mhm.
A summary of his or
Or
her
just a
feedback
response, the superintendent shall provide the board
with,
with his or her feedback.
with his or her feedback, okay.
Right, whether that's a summary
could
or
be
whether
in its
that's the
entirety, yeah.
actual, but I think that that was why that was put in there, was that, just that accountability.
oh yeah,
measure.
feedback regarding the matter, okay.
Okay, and the other, last question I had was, the very first sentence. It says, staff members, parents, and community members should submit questions or communications for the board's consideration to the superintendent. We don't ever consider it, really. It really, Mark kind of considers it, so should we take that out? Because we're not considering it.
No, but anything that they want to advance as a potential agenda item needs to come to the superintendent and or board president, because that's another policy that we have that.
But I just think it's unclear, because I actually had a community member say, I sent a letter to the board and I got a reply from the superintendent. Why is that? You know, why didn't the board respond to me? So, you know, so that, I mean, if someone's asking me that question, I think people have a question about that.
But why wouldn't this go to the superintendent? One, if they're asking for an agenda item, it would go superintendent or board president. But truly, if they want a question answered or something as such, unless it comes to the board meeting as a whole and the board has an opportunity to discuss it, the board doesn't have a formulated response.
So why are we saying that it's the board's consideration? Because we're not considering it, so shouldn't we take that out?
I think we're intermixing policies personally. I think this policy pertained to our communication in the board emails, and all of a sudden we're working in the parents and community, and we already have a policy for that, because we've always had a policy for that.
But I think it's kind of redundant.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I mean, it could come out of here, in any wording that takes into consideration what this is attempting to say, goes in that other policy. Because this policy was put in place for our internal email use.
The lower portion was, Mark, but if I'm not mistaken, I think the top portion comes from.
Right, but now
Our
because we're
policy.
trying to make the two together,
Yeah.
we're trying to mix them together, it's like, they should be two distinct policies. One for how do we communicate, and one for how does the community and us communicate. Because otherwise
That
you're
would
gonna
make
have
sense,
something,
because-
otherwise you're gonna have something up top that's gonna allow for a two-way communication, and something down below that says, oh, no, you're not allowed to do that. So just make them two separate.
So board member use of electronic communications, you see breaking that out as a separate policy.
Right, now that whoever's on the board, the 7 people who are on a board, will always have a district email address for communicating board items. And yet we still retain the collective email address for discussing community items. Or not discussing, but for receiving.
So you're proposing keep that opening paragraph as is with the 1-sentence modification for when the superintendent will provide summary. Have that be policy 2140 and generate, 2145. That'll be board member use of electronic communications and everything that follows it.
That's fine,
Is that what I'm hearing?
something like that. Just broken out into 2 separate.
And then by doing so, you feel then that that first paragraph would be a more appropriate representation of how people would want to communicate to the board. But although Gina, you raised the fact that you still think that.
Because we don't often he responds to the person that wrote to the board before we even see the response.
Right, I don't know.
So that's where I just think that's.
Right, I don't know how that, I don't know the definitive answer, because the reality is, if 3,000 people came in here and all 3,000 wrote a question on the green sheets, in order to do this by law, okay, what I think you're suggesting, all 3,000 items would have to become an agenda item. They have to, because there's no other way to reply to that individual unless we collectively talk, which means that somebody could bombard us on purpose with 3,000 requests, and we could have, 1 million meetings, because they'd all have to become agenda items. So I hear what you're saying, I hear what you're saying, but to do just the opposite would get you in a very, interesting area, because in order for the board to collectively respond, it has to be discussed as an agenda item.
So since we're not considering it though, shouldn't you just eliminate those words? Because we're not considering it.
No, it does come to the board though, we're aware of it. Because the superintendent will forward that information to us, and although
Well,
we
to
might not be
consider something
discussing
is isn't it to weigh in on something? And we're not weighing in, so what I'm saying is people think that we are weighing in when we're not. So I'm thinking maybe it's just word usage, maybe we should just change that word. The board's attention, because we're not considering it, but we're seeing it.
So staff members, parents, and community members should submit questions or communications to the board's attention through the superintendent?
I guess something like that, because
Yeah, I'm fine
does
with
it make
something like
sense
that.
though about the word consideration? When you consider something, you kind of weigh it, let me think about it, and we're not doing that. We're just seeing it, and he's responding. So we're not really weighing in, and like you said, it sometimes is impossible to weigh in when there's that many. But people may think that we're weighing in based on what it says in our policy.
So staff members, parents, and community members should submit questions or communication to the board's attention.
For possible consideration.
Why
Well,
did it say
here's
that?
what,
Could just say to
but
the
here's what,
board's
it's
attention, but then
possible,
you're
because
adding-
once we see the reply, any one of us could ask for it
That's
to be put on
correct.
the agenda, so.
That's correct.
Possible
Okay.
consideration.
That's fine.
I keep flipping this thing.
We're almost
Okay.
done.
Is that a wrap? Karen had us flip it about 10 minutes ago. Is there anything else? Okay,
We're gonna be almost done.
I think we'll figure that one out. 2250s.
This was the one for the FOIA that we talked about, the last paragraph. If an extension is needed, the Freedom of Information Officer shall, I have written in my notes, number 1, phone the requester to verify the scope of the request. And then 2, notify the person making the request of the reason for the delay. And 3, inform them, so change it. We've discussed that if there was some question or if we needed an extension, why, well, that's where you call them and verify it. Just have it written a couple times. I know we talked about it.
If an extension is needed, the Freedom of Information Officer shall
contact the person making the request to verify the scope of the request.
That's if an extension is needed, or you're proposing that right away from the beginning?
No, if an extension was needed, because you figure if there wasn't an extension, then they probably didn't have any questions, right? It was probably cut and dry. That's how I understood it, through our discussion. But if you're looking for an extension, then there's probably more to it, and maybe it wouldn't hurt to contact the person, because I had said, yeah, just call them all. Well, we can't, you guys talked about not calling every single one. Some of them are just so easy, and turnkey. But for those, we made the assumption that if there was an extension, that there was more information that was either needed, or, it wasn't just your typical cookie cutter kind of request. So why not contact the person making the request to verify the scope of the request? That was in an effort to try to drill down and not have 12,000 sheets of paper copied for someone, or, or if there was something, just to verify it, which I guess is pretty common practice. People are called, right? Gina, didn't you say you got called in school when you did a FOIA request? I mean, it's pretty common.
Yeah, LT always calls you and asks, they always call. LT, every time I've FOIA'd them, they've always called. Kelly is her name, I think. I can't remember her last name, but she always calls.
So, my memory serves.
And other districts have actually contacted me as well, like when I've asked for information. They've said, hey, you know what, our so-and-so person's on vacation next week, would you mind if you waited another week? I've always gotten communication back from places when there was like an issue and it couldn't be within the 7-day limit.
So how do you want it read?
Number 1 would be contact the person making the request to verify the scope of interest. And then change your numbers 1 to 2 and 2 to 3.
Terry, a little assistance on this. When you are asking for an extension, the reasons for that are well articulated in
the
law.
forms, yeah, right.
Right, so I mean, this is what directs what we do. So why would we include, other language?
Because you're looking for an extension, right? Because it's not cut and dry. It's either there's a lot of information, or there's some reason why you need the extension. Instead of putting, because we talked about, well, why not just call everyone and verify the scope of the request to try to make sure that we're not doing work for something, that's not really what they want, to clarify what they want. And I know Catherine had made a comment, she gets lots of them, they're really easy, there's no reason to call. So then we kind of talked about making the assumption that if an extension was needed, it's typically for something that's not cut and dry, right? It's either because it's a lot of information, or there might be something that, they can't get access to.
Well, that would be one of the reasons you would have it on that it's due to the large, I forget the exact wording, but that's in there as part of the reason.
Unduly burdensome.
And when did you call them? We don't call them for that either. It's not in there, so that's why we
But I think you
about
want to put this in writing because you never know what the interpretation is on the phone call.
But I think what she's saying is at the meeting, we had specifically discussed adding that in.
Yeah, we
And we
did.
agreed on it, and then it never got added in.
And I don't believe there was any board agreement on adding that in there, and it wouldn't be my recommendation to do that either.
So if it's unduly
Was that
burdensome,
in June that you guys agreed? Because I remember
Mhm.
before that, when we brought that up, there was some question.
I've got it on 2 different times. So we talked about one time I had it in green, and it didn't, and then, because we talked about it several times.
So then we did talk about it once, and then there was
Mhm.
concern raised that, no, don't want to do it all the time, so I do recall that.
So, shall
So
provide
you further
request-
talked about it later?
Yeah. Complying with the request would be unduly burdensome. That's under 3, right? And then 5, within 5 business days. So you're not recommending putting it in anywhere, is what you're saying, Mark, right? I mean, I don't really care where you put it, if you think it's better suited somewhere else, but that's what I remember we discussed it, and that it's an effort to try to make sure that we're not making 12,000 sheets of paper for something that's not necessary. And it's common practice in other districts.
Not just other districts,
Or
other public entity, any government agency is common practice.
What is the downside?
I don't know. I'm not
Is there a
sure.
downside
I think
there?
what you, on these things, because it's so legalistic and becomes that way very quickly, that you put in here what's required. And I think that's what you stick with.
Is there a downside though?
That's a policy issue. I shouldn't weigh in on that. We have advised districts when they don't understand the FOIA, call the person and try to figure out what it is or what they want. I mean, that can be done. I guess the question is, do you want it done automatically all the time?
I don't think we're saying to do it all the time automatically. I think it was
That's why we
just
did it
if
under
there
the
was
extension.
Right, I
an
understand. You're
extension
trying to
request, yeah.
Kind of, right.
keep the easy ones out of the way.
Correct.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't have to call everyone, yeah.
Right.
I think something has to be added, but how that gets in here and what that ultimately looks like would be interesting, because take a scenario whereby you feel something is unnecessarily burdensome. So you call the individual and say, it's a lot of work, can you clarify? And they say, well, I already put it in writing what I want. And then you have a discussion for an hour, and then you hang up, but nothing's in writing other than the original request, and everything else is verbal. So now you're relying on the interpretation of the individual receiving what they thought they heard, doing it, and then delivering it to the recipient who says, this is not at all what I asked for. Somehow that has to get summarized, and now you've got a discussion, and that discussion is gonna probably take place over greater than 5 business days. I'm using your example, the 12,000 sheets.
That's just one example.
But I'm using that.
Okay,
That took months.
right.
That didn't take 5 business days.
But we didn't make a phone call. And
But
and
even if
could've
we
drilled
did,
down.
I don't think that we could have. I honestly don't believe that we could have, but that's an opinion.
Right.
And it's an opinion just like your opinion saying that we could have, okay? So there are two opinions. What I'm driving at is, let's say it could have eventually, it would have taken greater than 5 days.
Then why don't you contact the person making the request to verify the scope of interest and have them verify it again, but via email or something if you think that's better.
It's gotta be written. It's gotta be written.
It could be email.
But if, right,
Email.
well, email's written. It's gotta be written.
Right.
But my fear is if they come back with the same exact thing,
Well, you've tried. At least you've taken a step, you've tried. I suspect that they probably wouldn't come back with the exact same thing, but by talking, without communicating, you're not gonna know.
This will only save the district time and resources by verifying the scope. I mean, that's all it'll do. And isn't that our goal,
I'm
is
not
to
saying
save
not to do it.
resources
I
and
started
time
off by
and money?
saying something has to be done, but you have to adhere to that 5 business days too.
Of course, that's the law.
So what's the terminology?
When I look at that, within 5 days, you'll comply, you'll deny, or ask for it to be extended. If you've complied, you've responded, you've given it to them. If you've denied, you've given them your reasons why. Now, some would argue you're denying based upon what you understand, and if you would have contacted them, maybe that wasn't what they want, and they could have taken something different. So, I hear what you're saying, because to put it there specifically for only when you extend, there could have also been value to put it there before you denied. Because then you denied something that, you felt that you couldn't give them, when in reality, what they asked for wasn't what they really wanted. And what they really wanted, you could have given them if you only had that conversation, so. Well,
But we're
I
not
think
saying that
here.
you're gonna deny it. It says shall comply with or deny.
Right, but I
Unless the
think,
response.
well, I was trying to follow up with what Mark said, is that you have to be within those 5 days. So there's 3 things that will happen. You'll either give them what they want, you'll deny it, or you're going to be extended. And what I'm saying is, if we deny it, you may have potentially not had to deny it if you had that conversation as well. Just like you might not have had to have asked for an extension if you had that conversation, because maybe they wouldn't have wanted the excessive amount of paper. But that's also true if you deny. Maybe you wouldn't have had to deny their request if what they wanted was possibly not what they truly asked for.
So
So like Mark said, where's the right place to put it?
Right. And it very well could be that if the discussion goes through and it gets further clarified, it just becomes a new FOIA, and the old one goes away,
Mhm.
and the time frame starts back at 0.
Unless you just say, you know, if the Freedom of Information Officer is unable to comply within 5 business days, they will contact the person making the request.
That sounds good, to verify.
And then that way
Scope of
you're
interest.
addressing, you know, I don't know if that's the right answer either, but.
How is that different than it says notify the person making the request of the reason for the delay?
You're not asking for, you're not verifying the scope of the request, you're just giving them a reason for delay. We want to clarify that we're calling them to make sure to verify the scope. You're just saying that it's going to be delayed, you're not asking for
No,
more
you have to give a
information.
reason why you're delaying it. There's specific reasons. It's a kind of a form that we get from the attorney that says, these are the permissible ways, permissible reasons for asking for an extension. And you know, it's very prescriptive language and legalistic language that I think is necessary.
But we're saying before that, before we ask for a delay or an extension, it's to verify the scope. If there's any question, right?
No, I don't, that's not what I'm hearing. Because if someone says, as an example, give me every document ever produced since the school started, you're asking, you're saying, we'll call for clarification if you think there's gonna be a delay. That's what I think I heard you just say.
Call for clarification.
And it's like, there's
Because
only gonna be a
certainly, what
delay
do you
because it's
want?
gonna be burdensome. Well, but
To narrow it
what do you
down, to
want? Well,
verify
I
the
said
scope.
everything.
Well,
Pertaining
I would
to what?
automatically call.
No, I know, but I'm saying I said everything.
In regards to what?
Yeah, every
Well, I just
attendance
said-
records?
Everything,
But you would-
everything
you
that
would-
the school's ever produced.
You would have conversation and dialogue and try to
Right, and that,
drill
but
down.
that's what I'm saying, so that, does that come when the request first comes in? Does that come when you're gonna request a delay? Does that come?
You could do it every time, but no one wanted to do that. That was my first recommendation, is make the phone call, verify. It's not that, but
I
it
mean,
needs
from
to
my
be there.
experience, the way LT does it is you FOIA, she automatically calls you. I got your FOIA, and we can try a test run, I can FOIA something tomorrow, and we'll just see how it goes if you want. But she automatically calls you back and says, I got your FOIA, and we're gonna be working on it, I just wanna verify this is what you need, and then she follows up with an email. That's what she does. Have you guys ever FOIA'd anything? Anyone?
No.
No one? That's how it works in general, anywhere you FOIA, that's how it works. I mean, that's how LT does it, I mean, I can
And I
forward you the
suspect they
many
get a lot more
FOIA requests
FOIAs
that I've
than we
done.
do.
And, it's just how it is, I mean,
I'm pretty sure that's what originally that's what we talked about, but they didn't want to do that, so that's
well,
why
I mean, we could talk about this for
So at
hours.
the very
Exactly.
least, if we're unable to comply within 5 days, to make that call. But Mark, you're not so sure, Robin?
Oh, no, I'm fine with that, yeah.
If we're unable to comply within 5 days,
Right, because we're gonna make that call anyway, because that's the delay, that kicks in the delay, which is already in there.
well, we don't have to make a call, we could just do it on paper. We're not saying we're not gonna do it on paper. Karen's just at least proposing that at least. we
No, I think you
make a
need to
phone call.
document, you need to, I mean, if you want to put notify the person in writing, I mean, that's inherent in the statement, but notify the person in writing. Notify
But
the
that's
person.
not what Karen's proposing. She's proposing getting that conversation going. And when you do things in writing, we know it's just a one-way communication. So what I'm hearing you is you're proposing, you make that phone call, you start the dialogue,
Right.
you get that conversation going.
And then confirm it in writing. Confirm the second discussion in writing or something, right? Because if you do something in writing, you're still making some assumptions, or you just say, I just wanna call and verify the scope of your request, I want this, or did I understand this, blah, 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 I don't know, It doesn't seem that difficult to do. I'm not sure why.
Well, if you put something in policy, it should be unequivocal, it's always done. You can't guarantee that a person would, I mean, there are people that you try to call but won't answer the phone. You know, that just refuse to be the recipient of a phone conversation.
But we're not
And-
saying you do that unconditionally, we're not saying you just do that. Karen's saying, in addition to everything else, your first step
Contact the
should be to
person.
contact the person.
Making the request, whoops, to verify the scope of interest.
So, and to do it when we're unable to comply, because if we complied, we're done.
Exactly.
But if we're not able to comply, have the first step be contact the person making the request.
Whether it be phone call or writing.
Just somehow contact them. And then the second thing would be then, well, it wouldn't even be a second. It's just, somehow we would work this in there where we would just say, if, you know, we're unable to comply.
Contact the person making the
Contact the
request to
person making the
verify the
request.
scope of.
So that would be under those two conditions. Does anybody else, and Mark, you said you'd be fine with that, Lisa? Okay. Terry, legally, is that okay?
Yeah, it's a procedure, you can decide what procedure is appropriate.
So it's my sense of the board that the board would like to see that in, so we'll draft it and bring it up at the next one.
Well, what exactly?
Here,
That we say, if
put it where you want.
that if we are unable to comply, that the Freedom of Information Officer shall contact the person making the request to verify the scope of interest.
What does that, you know, I really have to strongly recommend you not put that kind of imprecise language in this thing. It already says, notify the person making their request of the reason for the delay. So what you're saying is now that we're not gonna comply.
No, we're not saying that we're not gonna comply. We're saying that we're gonna call them to verify the scope of the request, to verify. So you're saying that we're just gonna notify them and say that there's a delay without drilling down or questioning, opening up some dialogue, conversation to see what exactly are you looking for? Because maybe that's not at all. What I think you want might not be what you're asking for, so let's have some dialogue. I don't know why that's so difficult, I really don't, and it's very common practice. And I think it would save us a lot of time and money if we just, you know, tried something.
And even if we were to deny something, yes, we're denying what we have on a request that may or may not be what the sender's intent was. We are assuming we understand it, and it may lead us to denying it. So all Karen is proposing is that we're unable to comply. So if we're unable to comply, contact the person, start that dialogue. The person may say, oh, that's not really what I wanted. Well, if you'd like something else, could you please send a, you know,
Or
follow-up
let me verify in
form?
writing. Okay, so you said this, okay, I'm gonna shoot you an email, shoot it back, say that you confirm what we just discussed, something, anything. Rather than, you know, wasting our time on stuff that might not be at all what they want.
Yeah, I don't know why this
Can
language
I-
doesn't say that here.
Can I read something?
Notify the person, I mean, this is required by law, so if you're,
It's a
if
policy we're
you're
talking
not
about.
going to comply, or if you are asking for an extension, there's a specific thing you have to do, and you put it in writing so it's documented.
Correct, understood.
So, what additional language is necessary here that would apply in every single situation?
Again, it's not hard and fast, it's not black and white. We are just calling to verify the scope, to verify this. Now, I just want to make sure this is what you want. Before I'm going to deny it, you're saying, well, we're going to deny it, or we're going to extend it, or we're not going to comply. You don't know without having dialogue. I said, it's very common practice. I'm not sure why you're pushing back on this.
Can I
Well,
read
what
something?
you-
It's a policy, it's not, we're not saying it's the law, it's our policy, our internal policy, to try to prevent
Policy is what
over-
you follow, whether it's a policy or the law, it's not like it's discretionary for the superintendent to follow it. So what I'm trying to drive at is, are you stating that unequivocally in every circumstance that you have to have a contact with somebody and a dialogue with them?
Did
No,
I
that's
say
not
that
what we
ever?
said.
No.
We said if you're unable to comply.
Can I
So
just,
if you can comply, just do it, respond to them. But if you're not able to comply, then that means one of two things. Either A, you're gonna deny, or B, you're gonna ask for an extension. Because those are our only three options,
Sure.
right? So what we're saying is, if you are going to deny, it may be worthwhile to contact the person first before you deny. Because you may, they may be asking for something that is, guaranteed under Student Records Act and you can't divulge it. And they don't know that. So sure, we can play hardball. And we can just send them that cold and hard letter back and say, we've denied your request and this is the reason why.
You keep using the word deny, though. Get rid of the word deny, because I understand that. But it could also be a delay.
Right.
Meaning like nothing's getting denied.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just we've got to bring in
Absolutely.
300 people to get the job done.
But what I'm getting at is that there are three conditions.
Right.
And if we aren't going to comply, Karen, if I'm putting words in your
No,
mouth,
it's
but
exactly what I've been, I don't know
if
what,
we
I don't
aren't
speak
going to
Chinese.
comply,
What's
then we're
so
gonna
hard?
do one of two other things. We're either going to deny, or we are going to request an extension. And what Karen is proposing is under those
No,
two.
stop. You said if we're not going to comply. That leads me to believe that you're automatically going to deny.
No,
You're
that's not what it
adding in,
says.
or we're not gonna comply, but we're gonna ask for a delay. Well, why would you ask for a delay if you're not gonna comply? That's what I'm driving at. Why would you ask for a delay
Gina, could you
Because
help us
you-
out? You found something.
if
Why
you're
would
not
you-
going to comply? But you're the one that keeps saying you're not gonna comply.
I think
That's
the
why I keep
assumption
going
is
down to
comply within
deny.
the first 5 business days.
Yeah, that's what you said,
Okay.
Mark, within the first 5
No,
business
that's
days.
not, I didn't say anything.
You did earlier, that we have to do something within those first 5 business days. That's what we're referring to within these 5 days.
Okay, so if you're not gonna
We have to
comply
do
within the
one of
first 5
three
business
things.
days, we're either going to deny or ask for an extension. That's what you're driving at. And if we ask for an extension,
Contact the person.
Exactly. Well, why deny?
well, what if
or
we
not
ask,
deny?
what if we deny?
That's what I'm
Contact the
saying.
person.
Why deny? Contact the person. Gina,
So,
help us out. What
contact
did you
the
okay,
person.
let me
in
just
either
read
case.
something. This is put out by the Justice Department, and the title is saying, Determining the Scope of a FOIA Request. And I'm gonna read what it says. When a broad FOIA request is processed for wide-ranging agency files, there is at least some potential for question about the scope of the records that are responsive to that request. Because only the agency ordinarily is aware of exactly what records exist within its files, it is up to it to recognize a potential scope question and to handle it fairly from both its and the requester's perspective. It's right here by the Justice Department that we should try to get to the scope of the request because we know what's in our files. The person requesting doesn't know what's in our files, we do. So we should say, what exactly are you looking for so we can give it to you? I mean, this is put out by the, I mean, I don't know how to figure out what this is.
But just for clarification, that's the United States Department of
You want-
Justice's
Justice
procedures for the federal FOIA law.
Well,
You're
just-
just making an analogy, Gina, but I just wanna make that clear. They're
Let's
not
just-
ruling on the Illinois procedures.
But it covers.
Probably correct. I'm not
Yeah,
positive,
yeah.
but probably correct.
No, I don't.
It says it's justice.gov.
Right, but you're just showing that as an
But
example
I mean, this
of
is what the
another
federal
agency
government
does.
does, so we're a small school district, why can't we follow what they do,
Right.
what they're saying? I mean, it would make sense, it would save us a lot of time, money,
So I'd like to
aggravation.
propose that we put this out there. You've got the recommendation. I understand, Mark, you don't want it. Mark Fredestorf. Mark Marably, are you okay with it? With adding something, some kind of verbiage, some kind
Yeah,
of
some
language?
kind of verbiage. I just think that at the end of the day, it can't be verbal, and it can't be summarized by the superintendent. The FOIA request is coming from a community member, or a business, or anybody, it doesn't have to be a community member. And at the end of the discussion, what's been discussed and potentially, let's say, agreed upon, has to come back in. It can't go out, because if it goes out, even if they say yeah, they could come back later and say, well, I didn't understand what you wrote, I just wrote yes, and now we're delivering the wrong thing anyway. It has to come from the requester.
So you
I
call
mean,
them,
you certainly would want
verify.
to, you would certainly make reasonable efforts if you had huge questions about what somebody was asking about. But when you put this in, there are people who FOIA us that have no interest in hearing from us. They want their information to make that clear. So you can't contact them. All you can do is send them something in writing, send it, certified mail that you've done it, so you've covered your legal basis. That happens. So my concern about this is when you put something that unequivocally you would contact somebody to verify requests of the scope of interest, and they have no interest in hearing from you. I mean, that has happened. So that's my concern about this.
Right.
But you're contacting them, right?
Right, and then what do you do?
No,
Then what do
but
do?
you're
Then
saying
you follow
the
up with
effort.
an email that says, I have made an effort to contact you regarding this, your scope of
Okay.
interest, you know.
Then what do you
blah, blah,
do? If they don't contact you back, then what do you do? And again, I go back to my scenario where I haven't asked for anything that's difficult. I've just asked for something that's burdensome. I've asked you to give me every document you've ever produced. Just give me every document you ever produced. You know what? How can it be any more clear?
That's
What do you
unduly
mean by
burdensome,
every?
so we don't
I'm
have to
saying
comply.
every. So now we turn around and we send that email out and we say, hey, can we narrow this down? And they don't get back to you.
Then it's
Now your only two
unduly burden.
choices.
Then you go to unduly burn them.
Then- Okay.
Well, not necessarily. The other
Right.
thing we do in our form letters back is, as we understand your request, this is what we're giving you.
Right, so
We
now
could do
we're still
something.
giving them something.
We're- Yeah,
And
or you're
it's-
denying
and
it.
it's-
As we
and it's
understand your
incorrect.
request, we
Right.
can't give it to you. One way or the other. You just try to frame your understanding.
So if you try to contact and that contact isn't made, the best you have is what you had to begin with. And
That's
that
right.
is their request and your interpretation.
Attempt
So then
to
you turn
contact.
around and deny it. So then you turn around and deny it.
That's right.
Is what you're
You have to.
suggesting? Okay.
You know, if that's, you know,
All right, so that's what, that's,
right,
all
you
right,
have no
so,
choice 'cause
so
you-
that, okay, so
Yeah.
that needs to be added into there. Okay, an attempt to contact will be made via phone, certified mail, email. If no response is given, then we deny the request.
Or you follow the process, your other process, which you said you got the form letter.
Also be an extension, so.
Well, I'm lost why you would ask for an extension at that point, because why don't you just do the thing in the first place? At that point, I think you have to give approval for denial.
Mark, all I'm saying is that there are 3 avenues that we can take.
I know, and if you drew a flow chart, you'd see exactly what I'm driving at. If you're saying, hey, it's too difficult because there's so much you're asking for, okay, that I'm gonna send a letter out, but if you don't reply, then I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm saying no, if there's no reply, go straight to denial and enforce a further discussion.
But we don't do that. We haven't done that. So at least.
Right, so I'm saying if we're putting in that if we're putting in the, hey, you have to now call. If we're
You
gonna
didn't
put
say
that
call,
in
it
there.
said contact.
Contact, call, contact, write,
So
knock
whatever's-
on their door, take them to dinner, I really don't care. If we're saying that you have to do that from now on, if they don't reply, I'm also suggesting that we add in, then request is denied.
That one you can't do legally, because unless you find a
But
specific
if you didn't
FOIA
understand
exemption,
it, how can you do it?
you do it the way I suggested. You just say, as we understand your request. This is our interpretation. You're not helping us clarify, so here's what you're getting based on our interpretation.
So you still might be giving them something based on your interpretation.
Right. And it may not be what they want, but at least you're
Or you still might be asking for an
complying.
extension
That's
to
fine.
give them
That's
what
fine.
Right.
you think they want.
That's fine.
Right, we still have to follow the path that's here to either deny or request an extension. Those are only choices. So we still go back to saying that what we are gonna propose, and we'll see where it goes, is that if we are unable to comply, then the Freedom of Information Officer will contact the person making the request to verify the scope of interest. And,
What do you mean by verify scope of interest?
how about we just say contact the person making the request? Whether you're verifying the scope or you're having another conversation with them, maybe that's too definitive, but the point is you want that contact to be made.
Right.
You might need to verify it. You might just need to get clarity. I'm kind of with Karen on this one, Mark. I too am having a real hard time understanding pushback. If we're
I'm saying
simply asking somebody to
the
make a
language
phone call.
just needs to be clear. And there's no guarantee through a phone call that you're making any kind of contact. I think it is important in policy to say you're gonna notify someone, and maybe to strengthen, say, in writing. And then where it has, making the request for the reasons for the delay. And you then explain that in a letter. It's very clear why it's burdensome, it's whatever it is.
Right, I'm not
I don't
having a
s-
problem.
I'm not seeing this as pushback, I'm just trying to get clarity on why this adds anything to this policy. And the language that's been suggested to me is no different than what's already here.
Right, I'm not having an issue with what Karen's suggesting, and we can firm up the contact. What I'm suggesting is, what do you do in the event that they don't respond?
Well, then you
I
contact the
understood.
attorney, and the attorney helps solve the problem. Because that's what we're
Then they
paying
have
her
the money,
for.
so-
I
Unless we
mean,
do
come
it
on,
anyway.
we're gonna go over this for an hour.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So we'll bring it and we'll see where it goes next month. That's all we can do. At this point, there's enough interest to want to propose policy change to include some verbiage to say if we are not going to comply, then the Freedom of Information Officer will contact the person making the request. Whether it's by phone, whether it's by email, we're not gonna spell that out. We just want an attempt to make contact. Got it?
Uniform, try it, try uniform, and it's all with an unruly thing.
No,
That's not
no,
what they say to
no.
you. Seriously.
Okay. We'll go on to determination of board self-eval. Karen, this is yours and mine from 2 years ago,
Uncle, I give up.
in the sense that what? We proposed to do it every other year in a non-election year, which means we should have done it in June.
I know.
And we should have done it. So here we are now in September. What is the board's sense on whether or not they feel a need to schedule a board self-eval for this year?
Put it out to the
I
board.
don't see the need. You don't see the need. Reason being?
I mean, I'd like to abstain from that answer.
No, I
mean, everything that Mark wants pretty much is approved, so there's really no reason that we're not moving forward. So I just think there's no reason to evaluate us, and we're doing what he is asking us to do, or the majority of the board is doing it. So, I mean, it's getting done. So why sit here and talk about us getting done what he wants to get done when it's getting done? I mean, I just think it's a waste of time. That's my personal opinion. Maybe someone feels differently.
Please?
I've struggled with the effectiveness of our board as a whole, working together. I feel it's been somewhat of a, I don't want to say hostile environment, but it's been a very difficult arena, I think, to try to feel comfortable with coming to the table with your opinions, with your feelings, and having, there's just not, I just don't feel like there's common respect. I think we have some issues here, some very underlying issues. There's a very negative current, and I think that it will continue to be if we don't sit down and we address it and we, put some things out on the table, and I think it does affect our moving forward and our effectiveness. So I do feel it's important that we have a board self-evaluation. I think it's time. I think it's time to be effective moving forward from here. And I think we're going to continue to be in this, in this very difficult situation if things are not addressed respectfully and maturely and.
So what do
So
you
we're all
see out of a
comfortable.
self-eval? See, I guess that's where, I don't know what we hope to gain from the self-eval. The self-evals that we had come up with were like those surveys are marked off A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, the level of, here's a question, how do you feel we rank? And then we kind of go over it, and we had a moderator. And I didn't feel that, I'm not sure that helped anything.
I'm not looking for, a structured survey, like let's all fill out a piece of paper.
Which is what was
ahead
in
of
the
time
past.
and bring it
That's
back.
why
I think there needs to be a free flow of conversation, communication, respectful, dialogue. And, I think we all need to know where we all stand and hopefully come to a reasonable agreement so that we can move forward and be a very effective board, because I really believe we owe that to the community, and I'm not comfortable with where we are. I'm really not. I'm sorry. It's just a
Don't be.
feeling. I feel it's, and so for that reason, I feel it's important. Mark? It's gonna slam.
I
me.
wasn't,
Tell
no,
him.
not at all. I wasn't gonna say anything, but I guess I'll comment now. I agree, but I also, I never believe in flushing my dirty laundry outside, okay? In the scenario that you're describing, the only way that would really truly be effective would be that we would show up. This would have one line item, open brawl. Because the reality is, under a respectful open brawl, okay? The reality is, in order for us to meet, okay, it has to be in public, and there has to be an agenda. You couldn't have an open dialogue and have an agenda. Because someone would walk out of here and say, well, I wasn't heard because everybody else took the last hour.
Couldn't you do
As
a
far-
board self-evaluation and as a board retreat?
We already have, the board retreat has to be held in public. Anytime, 3 or 4 more of us meet, we have to do it in public. So there's no such thing as.
There is
you
an
could-
exemption under the Open
There's-
Meetings Act if you have a representative from a statewide association. That's why so many boards
Exactly,
meet
and
with
we've
IASB.
done that and paid their fees in the past, and it's nice, they send us the invoice and we send them the check. And we wind up with things like this, which are worthless. So, my personal opinion, while I agree with you, is that at the end of the day, those things are worthless. I do agree with you. I do agree with you, but I think they're worthless.
I agree with Mark and with Lisa. Yeah, definitely there's stuff that needs to be done, but I don't know that there's any fix or any board self-eval that's gonna help to fix that. When we had it before, it was real nice, and I don't know that there was a lot of, free-flowing talk. I don't think there was anyone here, actually. I think we did in closed session, but nothing changed afterwards. So, respect isn't.
process, or is that the fault of the people?
Well, respect isn't given, it's earned, and it's a two-way street, and it just takes time and nurturing, and, it's not something that's gonna happen overnight. There's a lot of people that feel very strongly about different things. Even here as an example, we spent, an hour talking about something that we've talked about 3 times already. It's not brain surgery, it was just a simple recommendation to try to drill down and get more information, and, it was like, all right, it's either we do or we don't, and move on, turn the page, You get sick and tired of this. And so that's why I'm like, I really don't feel like spending 3 hours here doing this again with Lizelle, and I'm sure that's all that's gonna happen, so. That's why I think I'm gonna take myself off that committee, because I don't have any other ideas. When we did the research, I couldn't find anything that I thought was gonna help. So, but there might be something out there, I just don't.
Well, I think at the time it was a different situation. It was a different board. And when we looked at board self-eval, I think they were very scripted. Whether we did it with IASB or we did it with a moderator or a facilitator, it was still the whole Q&A, how do you think you're doing, let's rank, let's talk about it. I don't know that our board is there. I think our board has other issues. And whether we call it a board self-eval or we call it something different, how to make happen what Lisa, you have said probably needs to happen, and I agree with that. I don't know how to make that happen. I don't. You'd need a facilitator no matter what, because the only way 7 voices could be heard is to have somebody be impartial, and as Mark pointed out, they have to be in an open meeting, and this isn't the way it's going to go. I am disappointed that we're looking at a board self-eval for solving that dilemma that we're in, and I think it's unfortunate that we aren't also looking at a board self-eval for the purpose of really evaluating how we conduct, or not necessarily how we conduct ourselves, but how we are doing business. I don't know if it's enough to say, well, it's getting done, therefore we must be doing okay. I know I've always been of the opinion that we evaluate our superintendent, we evaluate our administrators, we evaluate our staff, but yet we don't evaluate ourselves. And that concerns me. But for the situation where we are right now, I don't know how to make a difference happen. It's one of the things I felt just so weak in this area, because I don't know what to do anymore. So.
Okay, so what do you recommend? I heard a yes and no and no and no. What
I
are you
would
saying
love
at
to
the end
have
of the day?
one, but on the other hand, I don't know how to make it happen. I don't know how to make it work. And without that, I feel very powerless. I don't know what to propose.
So is that a yea or a nay?
I'd have to say a no, but not in a good feeling. There's no doubt on that.
Well, I don't know that anybody has a good feeling. I said that I agree with Lisa, but don't think they work.
No.
So,
I think at this point, the board is not going to schedule a self-eval, but then I do think we are definitely going to be into a situation that as things continue to arise, we'll have to put them on the agenda for discussion. If we can't flesh it out in one self-eval meeting or something of the sense, then as situations crop up, we're going to have to put them on the agenda and just flush them out as they occur. I don't know else how to resolve that either. Mark, did I interrupt you?
no, we've been operating that way for a while, so just continue on.
Continue.
I mean, unless you hear something or see, I can't go to the board thing in November. There might be something at downtown. There might be something, I don't know.
At a conference.
The conference, right. But I haven't seen anything that I think is going to help.
So we'll move on then. Items for the next agenda is approving curriculum changes, review finance, section 4 of the board policies, technology plan status report, elementary, middle school improvement plans, adopt the proposed tax levy, approve application for recognition. Through whom?
This is through the state board.
Yeah, okay. And then extracurricular student activities, which will be a written report. Approving other board policies may be on next month's agenda as well.
Leandra, I have a question.
The
Approve
ones we
curriculum
talked about
changes.
today. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It says approve curriculum changes.
Mark, would you speak to?
Are we gonna discuss them first?
Discuss and approve, and if the board wants to do the approval the subsequent month, but that was what was on our, the board discussed this already. These were changes in Common Core math and upper level language arts. So this is work that's already been done, and typically for these kind of curriculum changes, the board has approved them in the same meeting, but that's up to the board.
Are we gonna get them in our packet then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else on the items for the next agenda?
Well, in light of this, the discussion we just had about the board self-evaluation not doing that, I think we need to add an item there regarding a document that board member Scaletta Nelson gave me at the end of the meeting in August. This was a document that she had put together, I think at the request of Mark Mobley, to discuss with me. And this had to do with her allegations of the superintendent bullying, I think was the word. And so I've repeatedly tried to set up a meeting, and I know Leander, you've also attempted to contact board member Scaletta Nelson to discuss our concerns, and that hasn't happened. So I do think, you know, that needs to be discussed, that it cannot just be, you know, kind of a one-sided personal attack with no opportunity to provide response to that. And so I think a board self-evaluation would be a good opportunity to do that. If the board's not going to do that, then I would like to make that an open session discussion.
I'd like to thoroughly disagree with that.
I agree with Mark.
I think that, you know what, if two individuals have an issue, don't take my time to resolve it.
Well, let me just expand on that. The allegations that were made were beyond the superintendent. They were really to the board as a whole, and policies the board has created that are being viewed as a bullying gesture toward one board member. So.
Correct. And if I thought for a second, Mark, I apologize for interrupting, but if I thought for a second that any explanation I gave would resolve that, I would have made that phone call already. But I don't believe that nothing's going to resolve that, and I don't care to waste any time on it. If you do, that's fine. Did at the very beginning of the meeting. I mean, I feel very strongly about that. I feel very, very strongly about that. Because I've made numerous attempts. Things still get said. I don't care to talk about it anymore.
That's a pretty sad
It is.
testimony, I think, on where we're at,
Certainly
if
it
that's
is. Certainly it is.
where we're at.
You were all here towards the latter part of closed session last month, and you witnessed what was done. So, I don't care to talk.
Any other thoughts?
You have a short memory if you're shaking your head no.
Mark, Mark, you also said that there was something in the document for the board as a whole.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I've got no direction on what to do with this. I mean, I'm happy to put it on the website. I'm happy to share it with the rest of the board. I think the intent, which I think was a laudable thing, was a recommendation that this was an opportunity for some dialogue. But if no dialogue is going to take place, then certainly this, I need to have some direction on what to do.
I don't think, you said, give me a list, I gave you a list, and in that letter that I sent you, I said, I don't wanna go back and forth on this.
I think we're going into a
I'm ready to move
discussion.
on, and it's like, you just keep coming at me
We're
and
going
coming
into a
at me.
discussion, and
But
it's not on the agenda.
It doesn't have to be on the agenda to discuss anything, isn't that correct? The only thing that has to be on the agenda is if we're gonna act on something.
Legally, I
Thank
don't
you.
know what your procedural requirements are.
Normally, you would ask for something at the beginning of the meeting, a majority of the board has to
Well, then
agree to
maybe-
place it on the agenda.
Then,
But Gina, if you could just speak as to why you don't feel that it should be
I
on
just
the
don't want
agenda next month,
to keep going
perhaps we
on
can
about
just
this.
focus on that.
I'm ready to move on, and apparently someone is not. I mean, you.
Okay, so you don't want it on the agenda because you
Yeah.
feel that what you shared in the
I
document
gave him what he
isn't.
asked for, and now it's just, let's keep going on and on about it. That's not
Let me,
what
let me correct. He did not ask for anything. Okay,
You
let's-
asked for, no, he
let's-
did ask for it, I
let's
have
go
it on
back-
tape.
Let's go back.
He did ask for it.
Let's go back to the June meeting.
Okay, but now we're
Okay.
discussing the June, can we?
You weren't
put
here,
it in-
you weren't
you're
here.
right.
Well,
Can we
I
put
was
it into
just
the
told that I
context of
could
this
talk
agenda
about this.
item?
I was just told I could talk about this. At the June meeting, you brought up bullying to the superintendent. What I suggested was, you get with the superintendent and you guys work it out, because basically we're at a he said, she said scenario. You bring in her list of complaints to us does me no good, because I don't know what transpired or didn't transpire between you two, which is the only reason I refuse to sit here for an hour and go through 3 inches of paper.
That's why you don't feel it should be on the agenda.
That's why I don't feel it should be on the agenda, because it's between you two. I recommended you put it in there, you did. Mark is trying to get a hold of you so that you guys can discuss it. You're saying, but Mark, why do you keep bringing it up? He's not. You brought it up in June. You brought it up in June. He's just trying now to say, here's all your issues, let's go through them and clarify them.
Okay.
Now, if you
And I'm
feel like
saying-
what I just said was bullying,
No, I
can't
don't
help
feel that.
it.
What I'm saying is he asked me for a list. He put me on the spot, and you said to me, can you come up with something? And I said, sure. And I gave it to you, and you gave it back to me, because you said it doesn't go to you, Leander, you were absent. And I gave it to Mark last month because I wanted to fulfill my obligation that he asked for a list and I came up with it. And in my cover letter, I said, I don't want to continue with this going back and forth. I just want to move on. This is how I feel. These are my feelings. I'm not asking you to feel my feelings or whatever the case may be. And let's move on. I'm out of town. You call me and you say, I want to meet with you tomorrow. I call you back and I said, Mark, I'm out of town. And I said, and you said, I need to know what to do with this. No, you sent me a letter. I'm sorry, I'm misspeaking. You sent me a letter and you said you wanted to meet with me. I called you when I got the letter. I was out of town. I said, I cannot meet with you. I'm out of town. And I said, you said, I need to know what to do with this. And I said, follow your policy. Whatever your policy says to do with it, that's what you should do. Then you come back to the board and say, she agreed to meet with me when she got back. And I never said that. I never said that. And then you sent me an email again saying, you're gonna meet with me on this day. I want to be done. I don't want to meet. I'm done. I'm ready to move on. So that's what I'm asking.
Well, I think here's the issue, this disturbing pattern of you putting things either in an email
Okay, now-
or personal attacks, and then not being willing to either discuss it or being confronted by it.
And you know what,
So that's the
Mark?
behavior, I think, that is at issue here. And if that's okay with the board, for a board member to be able to do that and not have any response from the person who's being attacked, I don't think that's correct.
Well, if you want to respond, why don't you just put it in a writing? Because you know that's my preferred method of communication. If you want to respond, then send me an email back. That would be fine.
And whether or not that is the right way or the wrong way, it really comes down to even issues that Lisa brought up is we cannot seem to find the right balance and ways to determine how to work together.
Could you see having a whole meeting like that?
Yeah, exactly.
So with that being said, I am not hearing interest in the board to have that item added to the next agenda. Is there anything else as far as items for the next agenda? Open forum. Anyone this evening? Please.
I'll say something.
If you could identify yourself,
I'd be
please.
delighted to. My name's Greg Singfield. Some of the folks know me in the room. I've been a resident of Burr Ridge for 15 years, a taxpayer in this community. I'm very happy to say I'm a proud parent of 2 students at Pleasantdale. I think the administrators, the staff, the teachers couldn't be more proud to be a parent in this district. So all of you, I commend you for the work you do. I'm really pleased to attend my first board meeting here tonight. It's been quite interesting. Sorry, I attend a lot of board meetings, and discourse is healthy. Diversity is healthy, and all those sort of things. They get worked out here. You're obviously very bright people, and you know, my children are doing very well here. I was very enlightened to hear your presentation because some kids are less fortunate. I have some employees with those situations, and I didn't really realize how much goes in to helping those children, and it's quite a bit. And it's money, and but it's more important. It's people like you all that make a difference. So I just came to be an observer. Came at a nice time, I think. It's probably my time to help my community in any way I can back. So whether it's PTA or helping Matt wave the kids in the parking lot or something like that.
Direct traffic.
I'm always happy to do that. But for what it's worth, my 2 cents is I think y'all are doing a wonderful job. I commend you for that.
Well, if that's the way we can end the evening.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, closed session. May I have a motion, please? I'm going to move. That the Board of Education move into closed session at, we'll say 10:18 p.m. to discuss appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, dismissal of personnel. Yes, thank you. May I have a second? Roll call?
Mr. Maraboli?
Yes.
Mrs. Nelson?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Halloran?
Yes.
Mrs. Hope?
Yes.
Mrs. Sutherland?
Yes. We could take a short recess and attend our needs.
I'll be right back.
Hi, Cal.
I motioned to Erica. She was not as never did.
Right, because we should have seen Dr. White.
I was so sick.
So am I. And I need to schedule appointments soon. I'm like, I don't even know what to do.
It's such a loss. It's awful. She's such a wonderful
He was
doctor.
amazing. I brought it up and I
Yeah.
put your camera on. Yes, okay, yes, yes.
Looks like it's
It's not, it's not